welcome today, guys. We've got some exciting topics to go over. Craig Shapiro has a great take here, so it's too bad he's not here to break this down with us, but next week he'll be on. He says, no Trump put plus no Fed put equals no bueno. Here are some updated thoughts. The Fed added liquidity into an uncertain economy back in the fall, driven by election uncertainty, and that turned out to be the wrong decision. Because what wound up happening was that the economy really didn't need that liquidity. So the end result was the long end sold off, interest rates, mortgage rates, auto rates went up. The economy reaccelerated, and the Fed once again got further away from bringing inflation back down to target. They paused cutting in January and are in no hurry to resume cutting. Fast forward to today. What we have now is an uncertain economy again, but this time the uncertainty is being caused by the Trump administration. After a few weeks of risk markets selling off and unwinds leading to P&L pain for many, the calls for Fed liquidity to resume are starting to grow louder again. This ask from the petulant children of the markets is misguided. The Fed is not going to be looking to add incremental liquidity, at least until there is certainty about policy from the administration on tariffs, tax policy this time around, because it won't want a repeat of last fall and having the long end sell off again. They are not going to waste interest rate cuts here when it is really the uncertainty in the economy that is holding consumers/businesses back rather than the cost of capital. This is particularly true given where inflation expectations have gone, which accordingly to survey-based metrics and prices paid indicators from the ISM are significantly higher as consumers/businesses are worried about the inflationary impacts from tariffs. The Fed is also likely to be concerned about future potential inflation coming from the budget deficit, spending announcements coming from Europe, China, and Japan, which figure to keep upward pressure on global yields and potentially could weaken the USD further on repatriation flows, something that may lead to more U.S. imported inflation. There will be increased competition from foreign countries looking to sell bonds, which is likely to make it harder for global yields to fall even when the Fed resumes cutting. So in my view, the Fed is completely off the table here for longer than the market is pricing in now. We should learn more about that next week at the meeting when they are likely to sound more hawkish than what markets has been pricing in lately, which is more cuts sooner. The market can't find a sustainable bottom until we find the strike price of the Trump put, because the Fed put can't come until the Trump put is reached. The Trump put will be found when the administration finally decides to provide certainty back to the economy. Perhaps this comes as early as April 2nd when the reciprocal tariff regime is announced, but more likely it will take weeks/months to work through as various countries look to retaliate or negotiate with admin. Until we get certainty from Trump, don't expect the Fed to help, and when the timeline to receiving Fed liquidity is elongated, risk markets typically don't like it. Scroll down. Let's see. Remain a seller of rallies. Interesting take from Craig here. I'm actually going to take the other side of this. I think that what's happening right now in the markets is we're actually seeing inflation being crushed right now if you look at the Truflation data. So I think the Fed for the past 4 to 8 years has actually been behind on lowering rates, raising rates, etc. And that's been a common problem, is that they've been way too slow to respond. But I think the data right now is clearly showing that they need to act sooner rather than later when it comes to cutting rates. And that is indeed what the Trump administration, what Howard Lutnick has been talking about, what Scott Bessent has been talking about, is they want rates to come down, and they're going to do whatever they need to do, even if it's a short-term recession, even if it's putting pressure on markets. That seems to be the coordinated strategy here. And I think the Fed is going to look at that data, and it is indeed showing that the markets have come down, that there's a lot of uncertainty in the market, and I expect them to cut sooner rather than later. Maybe not. I would not be surprised if they shocked markets and came out and actually said, "Hey, we're going to cut this time at the meeting." But my guess would be it wouldn't be this time; it would be the following time. But I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if they did cut. So I'm going to take I think Craig raises a lot of interesting points and has a thoughtful analysis, but I'm actually going to take the other side of that. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I have two thoughts. One,
let's hear it.
The Fed shouldn't be setting interest rates. It should be set naturally by the market.
Well, no shit. That's a no fucking brainer.
I know. I'm not going to harp on that too much. Two, I saw an interesting point that one of the things for corporations is they don't like volatility at all.
Yeah.
So they're not sure whether they're going to be having increased prices for foreign goods or not. So that's actually going to incentivize them to start bringing production back into the United States to avoid the tariffs. So,
that seems like part of the plan for sure.
So he's making, like, even if he said, "Oh, you're all getting 20% tariffs," and if they kept by that policy, then they could plan around it. But they have no idea what's going to happen, so they can't plan. So they're like, "All right, we got to try and find a way to make things stable."
Yeah, you're right. The plan is to incentivize domestic repatriation of supply chains. I mean, that is literally
that's Trump's plan. And
they've been saying
he's
that.
doing that, and then the corporations are going to respond to that by bringing production back to the States.
Sorry, my godson's
That's
looking
one
at
theory.
me. Yeah. What about you, Alessandro?
My general take is, I would say early analytics from, I think, last week when they released the report, things look pretty good. I mean, I think inflation's moving downward, and I think that's what Powell's really looking for. I don't personally think that we are going to see a change next week. I think that he's going to wait and see, given a lot of the sharp decisions by both the Trump administration but also globally other countries. And so I think he's going to take a wait and see approach for probably one more turn, see how things play out, and then make a call in a couple months.
Yeah, that seems to be probably the consensus take of what you just said. But I would not be surprised. I know the Fed is supposed to be this independent political thing or whatever it is. It's not supposed to be.
It's supposed to be apolitical.
It's supposed to be apolitical, not influenced by anything. But you better believe that there's backdoor communication from the administration, and Trump's made it very clear, and this administration's made it very clear they want rates down, whether that be for mortgages or all sorts of other things. But mainly, the main reason they want it down is because we've taken on so much debt, we've printed so much money that when the debt comes to be refinanced, which is $7 trillion of it, I think is happening in the next 6 to 12 months, they want rates down so that the U.S. taxpayer doesn't have to literally all our tax revenue going to just pay the interest load on that debt. So I think that's a very important thing, and I don't think the Fed wants that either. They don't want most of U.S. taxpayer revenue going to pay a massive amount of interest on the debt, and I think that would be. I think it's in everyone's best interest, whatever they say, whatever they communicate. I think that however it's done, when that debt comes to be refinanced, you better believe interest rates are going to be a lot lower than they are today.
Absolutely.
So, you can read the tea leaves or whatever it is, whatever happens. And I think that is really the goal here, to try to get a balanced budget with everything that's happening with all these Doge cuts and just streamlining efficiency and cutting wasteful spending. Cutting down on inflation is also a major goal. And have you looked at what's up, buddy? Have you looked at the Trueflation data? Have you seen those charts?
Yeah, I looked at the report when it came out last week. And
what report are you talking about?
The CPI reports.
Oh, you look at the CPI reports. Okay. So I guess there's these Trueflation. Trueflation is this model that's been kind of leading the CPI and all of these other things. And it seems if you look at the inflation rate chart on Trueflation, it's just literally dropped to 1.3%. I know we've shown it here a couple times. So if the Fed or people there are seeing that data, the data is starting to kind of show that. If you look at this Trueflation index, we can probably pull it up here. Yeah.
While he's pulling that up, I heard that the current inflation is 2.7 annualized or something like that, and the last one was 5.7 or something.
Look at it right there, Trueflation U.S. Inflation Index. Pull up the first one. Click on the first one. So yeah, if you look at that, look at that chart from January. Look at from January to March. Go to 6 months, Paul. Change the chart at the top where it says 6M. Nope. Down. It's actually in the window right there. Yeah, change that. I mean, if you look from January to where we are in March, I mean, the target inflation rate is 2%. That's what they want to see. I mean, this thing has literally fallen off of a cliff, and this is actually updated daily. So year on year change updating daily. So pretty wild. I don't know everything. I don't know how accurate this is, but I've seen a lot of posting, discussion, debate, talk about it on Twitter. It's probably much better than whatever the official government data is. It seems it's likely much more accurate. So it says here, Trueflation by Truff Network.
Sorry, I'm going to hand Ronan to Peyton for a minute.
Oh, okay. All right. Sounds good. He can definitely watch them. What do you got next for us, Paul? Anybody else have any closing thoughts on that topic? And what do you think, Jeff? Do you have anything to weigh in on? Or
that last part where it says remain a seller through rallies, is that mean we'll probably see a downward slope?
Basically what And again, we'll talk to Craig when he comes on the pod next week. But I think what he's basically saying is that the low is not in, right? He thinks that this is like maybe a dead cat bounce in the markets, and things are still going to trend lower, right? I'm not sure. I don't know. But I will take the other side on what the Fed does. I would not, looking at that data, they said the Fed is saying that they're data dependent. If they have access to that data, I don't see why they wouldn't start the cutting cycle. They would reevaluate and look at that because, inflation seems to be really falling off of a cliff with a lot of the policies and stuff that's happening by the Trump administration. Really the goal is to really tamp down on that, and we're seeing it, right? Oh, look, we got the Doge tracker. It looks like they saved a little bit more money now. It was at $105 billion last time we looked. Every time we do a pod, it's like another $5 to $10 billion saved from the goal.
Another 20 contracts canceled.
Really? Yeah, I'd love to see it. Love to see it, right? Because we got to get this under control. I mean, we got to get the spending under control. It just can't continue the fraud, the waste, the abuse, the corruption. It's just got to stop, right? It's leveraging and putting the future of our civilization, of Western civilization, on the cutting edge. I mean, this is
not only that, it's also
future generations. Yeah,
it's taking productive labor and value and putting it to maybe productive, but we have no way of telling, and we can say for at least some of it not productive.
It's definitely not productive. Definitely fraudulent.
Right. I mean, saying 100% unproductive, maybe not, but there's a good chunk that is being thrown away for political reasons, and that needs to be fixed.
The difference is when value is created in the free market, it's because society and civilization finds it valuable, right? When government takes taxpayer revenue from productive citizens and then reallocates to all these slush funds and scams and grift and whatever else may be, even if some of it may be helpful, the problem is there's no market feedback to that spending, right? So we've cut all this government waste and spending, and it looks like we've been in a recession this whole time. I saw something absolutely crazy, where it was like 80% of all of the economy or spending is just government spending, like that. That's insane. That's essentially communism. I mean, that's not a real market. That's not a real economy. That's just totally fake, totally fraudulent.
No, it's absolutely crazy, some of the stuff that Doge is uncovering, and I love the fact that they have a Twitter that you can go and follow. And,
so good.
And literally see like what they're cutting.
It's so good. It's so good.
And it makes me laugh. I mean, what was it? Trump the other week said something about there was an $8 million contract to see if mice could be made trans.
I think we might have played the clip on one of the episodes where Trump just went like, I think it goes at the State of the Union when he just went off about like he read like 5 or 6 things that Doge cut, and it's like you can't even make this shit up. It's like it was so classic to watch him say that. It was like he's doing this on live television. It was like one of them was like, $50 million for to study sedentary migrants in the African nation of Lesotho. He's like, nope, which nobody's ever heard of.
Well, it's the problem when it's not your money, right? It's just like some guy's getting an idea across his desk, and he's like, okay, cool, like I'll fund it, $8 million.
Crazy.
Not his money, not their money.
No, I mean, I think that's obviously, it's got to be fraud. I mean, that's totally ridiculous. I mean, totally insane. I mean, absolutely insane. But yeah, he's like transgendered mice here and Afrocentric studies and fucking
there was also
some other country.
It was like a climate change NGO that was spun up a month before they got the funds, and they got $7 billion.
Yeah.
It's just like...
I mean, you've got Biden administration staffers, like 2 of them leave the administration before the end and get like some vaccine company funded for $30 billion. I mean, just total corrupt bullshit, and all these slush funds from the USAID money to all these sitting Congress people. I mean, just utter and total corruption.
And when you say yes to something like find out if these rats can be transgender or whatever it was that you said, like how do you say no to a good idea? So you get another expensive, really good idea that comes across the table, and it's like, well, no, you said yes to the trans rats. Like you gotta
fund this too. We gotta fund that sedentary migrant study.
Or it's racist.
Lesotho. Yeah. Or LGBTQI. What did he say? Like LGBTQIA in some other country, some other like in the Congo or something. It's just too funny. You just can't make this shit up. Can't fucking make it up. Can't make it up.
Making a Sesame Street or something that costs like $10 million and got like 100 views or something.
Middle Eastern Sesame Street or something. Yeah. So, what else you got for us, Paul? Let's move along here.
Go ahead. Were you going to say something?
No, you.
Okay, so I was just saying, since you're on this macroeconomic sort of, side of things, here is an interesting take by David Freeberg.
Oh yeah, David's got some great takes. Let's pull it up. What has he got for us? Oh, okay. Yeah, I read this. This was good. Make sure you follow him. I can't believe how am I not following him? If only somebody didn't go through my X and delete all my followers, all the people I was following.
I'll take the blame.
Go follow.
The ratio was out of whack.
Go follow him, please. America's biggest mistake. A portion of every American's paycheck is deposited into the Social Security Trust Fund, which is then invested to create returns that aim to support long-term retirement payments. Since 1941, OASI has only invested in U.S. Treasuries, averaging an annual return of just 4.8%, which, of course, we know doesn't really keep up with inflation over time. Meanwhile, the S&P 500 has been compounding returns at 10.5% per year. If instead of buying Treasuries, OASI bought the S&P 500 index starting in 1971, the year the U.S. went off the gold standard, it would have a $15.1 trillion balance today, and Americans would all share ownership of approximately 1/3 of America's best companies, likely supporting increased retirement benefits, lowering taxes, and reducing federal debt levels, while being the world's largest sovereign wealth fund. Instead, OASI has a $2.7 trillion balance today, so it has literally like it could have had 7 times more, like 5 to 7 times more money, and is projected to go bankrupt in 2032 as retirement benefits swell, while annual returns on U.S. Treasuries held by OASI have shrunk to approximately less than 3% per year recently. Many economic inequities in America can be traced back to this structural mistake. By not investing OASI in equities, only privileged Americans with private pensions, 401ks, IRAs, and other investment retirement accounts have benefited from the marvel of American capitalism, leaving behind the tens of millions of Americans who had no choice but to rely on Social Security and were left reliant on low-yielding U.S. Treasuries. It is not too late to change. Social Security can still pivot to an equity-driven investment model, driving future balance sheet growth, providing investment capital to American businesses, reducing the dependence on federal taxes and money printing, and giving all Americans ownership in America's best businesses. Rather than create a new sovereign wealth fund while ignoring the imminent failure of Social Security, legislators can restructure Social Security by adding approximately $500 billion directly to OASI, investing the entire balance in the S&P 500, and assuming future annual returns of approximately 10.5%. OASI will grow while also meeting all future retirement obligations rather than shrink away into insolvency. The longer we wait to fix Social Security, the more expensive it will become. Shifting to an equity-driven investment model now could ensure its long-term viability, addressing economic inequities across the U.S., creating the world's largest sovereign wealth fund, and give every American ownership and participation in the rewards of American capitalism. I think that's a fantastic take. I've been thinking about it for a while now, and it's literally a travesty that they don't do some version of this, because the counter argument is always, well, people that need to retire, they can't risk being a part of the stock market. They can't risk being in a recession or a depression when they want to retire. But that could easily be solved by taking the money that people are putting in now. You could have different baskets for people who are retiring every 5 years, 10 years, whatever it may be. And the people that are retiring within 10 years or 12 years, you could start migrating that into treasuries, right? You could say, okay, every year as you get closer to that retirement age, we're going to put 10% of whatever you have in stocks. We're going to rebalance that into more treasuries, and that way you're not exposed. By the time you retire, maybe 20% is still left into invested in the S&P, and the rest is just treasuries, right? And that over time continues to be like that, right? But when you're young, when you have 50 years, right? If you're putting money into Social Security at age 30, you're not retiring for 35 years. I mean, 99% of that money should be going into the market. And I'm going to take it a step further on his idea. Why aren't we adding the best performing asset in all of human history over almost 2 decades now to that basket, right? Which is Bitcoin. Why is not 1 to 2% of that basket? Why couldn't 1 to 2% of that basket be Bitcoin, right? Especially for the people that have 30 years to retire. We need to start. It's time for the next generation to take leadership here and start presenting some ideas and some solutions to the problems that the previous generations have created for us. Because what is happening now is not working, and it's not going to work. And this is absolutely, it's literally a Ponzi scheme. I mean, they don't have the money to pay. They're taking money from other things. I mean, if this was a company, it would be fraud. This would be like Sam Bankman-Fried. he taking, that money he would literally be in jail. The people who are running this would be in jail. If this wasn't the government, it would be completely illegal. It would be a Ponzi scheme, and they would be going to jail, essentially, right? I mean, that's what's happening here.
Something that does make me concerned, though, is, yes, I agree that would be a better investment strategy, but now we have the government owning stocks of private corporations now. And so, if the government has, let's say they did do it so they have $7 trillion worth of stock. Now, is a politician going to call up any of these companies and say, hey, I need you to do this, and I need you to support DEI instead of, being merit-based hiring practices? That's just
So there is a question of the voting shares of owning that stock, which probably if it's managed, there has to be, again, these are problems that can be solved by thinking through them thoughtfully and creating legislation or, rules-based systems around it. So exactly what you're describing can happen, but that's already happening as is. I mean, what you're describing is literally already happening. So even without this, that's happening, right? Which is crazy. It's absolutely insane.
They can even have non-voting stock, but if you dump, up $50 million in a single day of that stock onto the market, it's going to tank the price for a while. I mean, maybe some people will see it as a buying opportunity.
I think that there's
devil's in the details is all I'm saying.
Again, a lot of this should be managed. So it's like, this tranche of Social Security for people who are 30 or younger, or age 30, age 31, they could literally have a tranche in different little buckets for each, year, right? Every single year. Like if you're 31 years old, 32 years old, those should all be like little buckets. And then each one of those, the incoming flows of purchases from these ones will offset any sells from the other ones, right? This could be catered to and created very thoughtfully. And it's time to really think about this. What I always hear from my friends who lean farther to the left is, oh, we can't put people's money at risk. And my counterpoint, like basically the whole concept of, oh, if this person you can't have volatility or whatever. But if you're not retiring for 40 years, you can absolutely have volatility, right? If you're retiring in 5 years, you want to limit that volatility for sure. I mean, there's no contestation to that point.
You could even leave the people that are retiring right now, leave them in the same risk basket, because the younger kids will be able to offset that.
Absolutely.
And so, you start at 20 and you get returns. After 40 years, you're still going to annualize 10.5% or whatever. And you have 1 year that's bad. Your entire investment over those 40 years is barely going to change in its percentage.
Yeah, it's going to be exponential. I mean, you can see that they're exponentially higher. So whatever this $2.7 trillion is now, they should maybe leave that. And if there's a way we can add some equity to that, great. Some equities to that, some Bitcoin to that, great, fantastic, to help those people get a little bit more. But the people that are paying into Social Security now, this should be absolutely a separate bucket, and it should be invested. It should be, the aim is to get growth there over the course of 40 years. And, the evidence is very clear that the market, the S&P has performed at around 10%, 10.5% every single year. I mean, the compounding value of that is so much greater than what we've seen here. And not to mention, I mean, the most insidious form of all this is that the official metrics of inflation, whatever they tell you, if you actually looked at what the initial Social Security checks could buy you, like today you get a $1,600 check. Like, what does that buy you? Nothing. Well, back then, the purchasing power of that Social Security check was like $15,000 of what you would get monthly. Like, that's a big difference, right? Like, if your Social Security check was $15,000 and you could buy that every month, I mean, that would be fantastic, right? Everybody would be like, this is not broken. We don't need to fix this. Like, this works really well. I've got all this money. Everybody would be happy to pay in if that was the case. Right? Like, hey, you basically get this annuity at the end that pays you $15K every month.
I mean, we don't even necessarily have to fix anything. We just have to get rid of all the fraud, and everyone's checks would go up.
I hear you. I think it's a big part of all of this.
I'm not saying we don't fix it. I'm just saying, even if we just talk about the fraud aspect of the thing.
The problem is we need capitalists to come in and actually fix these problems. You got incompetent fucking people that have never been in the real market, that have no idea what they're doing.
We need productive members.
We need productive members of society. The other people, if you're a government employee and you do a good job, fantastic. But you work for the people, and I don't know. Hopefully, you have free market experience. If you don't, the people that have free market experience and actually creating value should absolutely be more involved in all this. And I think we're seeing that with Elon now, with people like Trump. We have to fix these issues. This cannot just be a Ponzi slush fund that we keep pumping money into left and right all over the place, whether that be through USAID and all these little NGO bullshit, or whether that be through our Social Security, right? So I think David has really interesting takes here, and I think this should be explored and unpacked, and we have to come up with some ideas. Like the the U.S. right now is thinking about a sovereign wealth fund, and other nations have that already. So that already exists, kind of what you're talking about, where they have influence.
I think Singapore had a really good retirement strategy. I read about it like ages ago. I don't remember, but it was something that was good.
Yeah.
The issue in my mind is fundamentally a lack of choice for the everyday taxpayer.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think one thing that I wish David would maybe go a little bit further, maybe this is a future post, is actually being a little bit more hard hitting on like why has that decision been made and why we lost so much money as a result of that. If you look at the free market and you get a 401k from a company, you can go out and you can pick what you want to invest in, and you have the ability to make that choice.
Somewhat. I mean, they still, even with that, it's very hard to pick what you want to invest in. They're like, hey, you can buy these 4 things.
It's definitely limited. You only have a set amount of choices. Depends who you go with and
better
what
than
plan.
This, though.
But it's better than this. I mean, I as a taxpayer have no idea. Like, since my first paycheck, I'm just giving money to Social Security. No say, no idea what's going on, no visibility into any of that. And so, in my mind, I hope that we find at least the root cause here of why stuff like this happens, and then find a way to give the taxpayer an opportunity to at least decide where their money goes. And I don't know how you'd operationalize that, but that gives people the choice to say, hey, I'm 25 years old and I actually want 30% Bitcoin exposure. Or, I am 57 and I really want a lower risk portfolio. And you can make that choice.
The counter argument to that is that, and this is what I hear from my left leaning friends, is that people are too stupid. Everybody wastes the money. They need to, like the average person is unsophisticated. They're idiots. That's basically,
right.
Which goes in line with a lot of their ideological thinking, which is people are too dumb. We need to lie about the vaccine or do this or that to
which
if that's like the case, treat people like animals.
You make a system so that they can just save in their currency, and they think they accumulate for 40 years of just the currency, and then you can live off of that for the rest of their lives. Stop debasing the currency so that people can't save anymore.
No, I mean that's a valid
That's the
point,
real
right?
answer to that part.
But that's the whole aspect of Keynesian economics, right? Is to debase the currency slowly over time. I mean, this magical 2% number that they just made up out of thin air, and it's actually way higher, but they rig all the metrics to make it look like it's lower. That's the point. They don't want you to be able to save. They want you to just buy worthless shit, spend on everything. It's a different. It's a worldview that is literally incentivizing just spend.
Yeah,
I mean,
they think the only way the economy actually works is if you consume. Yeah, but they assume you have to produce something to consume later. So they're putting the wrong thing first.
Yeah. What do you got, Jeff? You got any takes on all this?
I think what's variable that's changing, the dynamics of it is the option to have things like Robinhood or places that you can, we didn't have that decades ago. I think in the next few decades, it's going to change, because now you hear kids, young people investing in the companies that they want to and choose. So I think that also might play a factor down the road. And
investing isn't for big professionals anymore. The layman can do it, and they give you educational courses on the website or the app.
Yeah.
It's funny, my niece just started a job, and she asked me, should I set up a Robinhood to start making some investment decisions? And I think one of the cool things that you're seeing in the younger generation is interest in actually making their own choices, doing their research, and investing in either stocks or different portfolios. And so, I don't know, I'm optimistic. I mean, maybe the government can find some way to partner with Robinhood or some of these mediums of exchange to find a way to put Social Security to a better use.
I think it's got to happen. We got to figure out a solution here, and the older generations have failed us. They've created a situation that's a Ponzi scheme that's not going to last. That's not going to work. It's just not. It doesn't make the numbers. The math ain't mathin', I guess, is the point, right?
And I think if the Trump election win says anything, it's the mindset of I'm smarter and so I should make the decision.
Exactly.
Doesn't work. I mean, that's why Kamala lost in the first place.
Yeah.
Is this idea of I know better, so I get to make the choice? That is the everyday American.
We gotta lie.
Saying no to that.
We gotta lie about true factual things and censor things because we don't want vaccine hesitancy.
I mean,
and it's like
tantalizing the populace.
Exactly, that's what it is. I mean, you're either an adult or you're adult. You either have personal responsibility or you don't. And I'm so sick of all this.
For what you do or you don't.
This thought process that just and it's literally so pervasive that it's fucking infected our culture, and it's disgusting. And I'm done with it. Like we got to be done with this nonsense. Like Even like the All In guys, like I hear their discussions, and it's one of my favorite podcasts. But like, probably every other week, I hear this whole thing about like, oh, people can't make, we should like people aren't smart enough to make investments, and we have to do some kind of like thing, right? Like some accredited like the whole accredited investor thing. People are too dumb, right? It's like, listen, people have to learn. People have to be responsible, right? You can't like and the information is freely available. Like if you really want to learn, like you have access to the internet, which there's really no excuse anymore. And a lot of times people learn by making mistakes. You make a mistake, you do a bad investment, you do different things, and you kind of like learn, right? Like, okay, here's risk here, there's potential reward here. That's just part of being involved in markets in general, right?
Some of that just sounds like excuses for like, oh, why aren't people doing this? Because it's better for them. Like, they must not be doing it because they're stupid, not because whatever you're suggesting is a bad idea.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's myriad of factors.
And part of it is too is like, people know what the right decision is. They just don't make it, right? And that's personal accountability, right? So that's a big part of it as well. What do you got here? Sam.frax. I spent the past week in DC involved in the crypto BTC stablecoin action happening on the Hill. People following things only online are missing important context. There are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen. Last week was one of those. Paul, can you open the second post?
Yeah.
Which one was it?
Oh, okay, it's right there, yeah. Paul, can you do me a favor? Can you, on this TV, can you open the magnification and up it to like 120% on the screen? I mean, I can still read it, but it's definitely like it's really small.
Most definitely.
Last Thursday, President Trump signed the BSREO that enshrines Bitcoin as the sovereign commodity asset in the eyes of the U.S. This has huge socioeconomic ramifications. Bitcoin is an asset class of its own, full stop. Major props to David F. Bailey for this historic achievement. So what is he talking about there? He's talking about like we have a strategic Bitcoin reserve, right? Bitcoin is obviously being treated different than other digital assets, right? Which I think is important. Some online have said the EO does nothing and future admins will undo it. The operators on the ground that made this happen are 3 steps ahead of the podcast doers. You have to see it to believe it, and I believe it after seeing it. Can you scroll down a little bit more? There will be proposed legislation soon to make the U.S. a Bitcoin superpower, as Saylor aptly put it. Next moves are already being discussed. I was there. And negotiated for gold redenomination, etc. Saylor and David F. Bailey have bigger plans than what anyone expect, and they will do it. Scroll down. You got to go down further. That was the same post. There's a huge push to pass the Bitcoin Act by Senator Lummis and Jim Justice from West Virginia, which will take center stage after stablecoin legislation is done by August. Most people are sleeping on this and don't realize it yet. Last week was only the first chess move. So speaking on that, like I've spoken to Cynthia Lummis about this, and she seems to think that they have the votes to do this, right? Like within Congress after everything's settled and shaken out. And this was maybe 6 months ago that we talked about it, but she seems to think that this will pass, this Bitcoin Act. So he's right here that people are sleeping on that. I don't think that people have even understood or fully comprehended what that means, right? That takes, we have this EO, this Trump's EO, but that like doesn't take actual buying pressure aside from, I think budget neutral things, and just kind of takes and holds what we have, which is a great start. But if Congress, if the people elected representatives pass a legislation that gets agreed on, there could be a new government consistent buy, just like what we have with gold and a lot of other things, right? Reserve wise. Let's go to the next one. Scroll down. Scroll down a little bit. Speaking of stable coins, that's where I had most of my attention, reading multiple drafts of the Genius Act cover to cover and working with Dan Spuller and Blockchain Association to suggest feedback, revisions, some of which is in the final wording of the current bill. And I don't think I've ever met a bigger stablecoin supporter than Secretary Scott Bessent, who's always present, encouraging issuers in the room. Can you scroll down more? That he understands stablecoin dominance directly translates to USD dominance in the 21st century. There's no second best Treasury Secretary. I completely agree with this. I mean, I was so happy when Scott Bessent got confirmed, because really right now, part of the reason with Social Security going back, like they want all that money in treasuries from the taxpayers, is because they want to create demand for treasuries, right? So there's this like kind of, even though it might not be in the best interest of the people that are retiring, they need the market to have a buy for U.S. bonds, U.S. treasuries, U.S. debt, right? Even though the taxpayers essentially, it's just like another hidden tax. It's another debasement that the taxpayers are taking. So it's like it's almost doubly as bad, right? They know they're getting debased. They know they're debasing people that are saving. They know that the value of Social Security is going down, but it's almost intentional in a way, right? Like they're forcing you to hold an asset that is not even keeping up with inflation. That's really losing purchasing power over time, right? Scott Bessent really understands when it comes to crypto rails, when it comes to this idea of stablecoins. Stablecoin issuers are buying U.S. debt. It's like this crazy worldwide. It's unlocking this new market for treasuries, for reserves. At the same time that we're having problems with other countries that they're stock. Like usually, the big buyers of these things are like nation states, right? Like they buy U.S. debt, obviously pension funds, Social Security, all these different things. But allowing a whole new market, something like the fastest growing, one of the fastest growing industries in all of humanity, right? Allowing these new issuers to come in and basically say, hey, look, we're going to buy your treasuries and we are going to, our whole company business model is based off of the spread we make from the interest, right? In the meantime, we're providing the service, which is allowing the dollar now to be on the next evolution of money, the rails that are going to power the future of money. So we're taking the dollar as this asset and we're basically taking it out of bank accounts and we're literally putting it on chain, which is going to unlock all sorts of other things, allow people globally to hold more dollars, people that need it in different places, different countries, wherever, right? People that couldn't even, half the planet can't even make a bank account, right? But now they have access to dollars on blockchain rails, right? Which is fantastic for the world, right? Especially a lot of these people who are living in countries that they can now access Bitcoin. They can have, USDT or USDC stablecoins if they want, with just a couple clicks of a button. And that is directly translating into demand for treasuries, right? So there's your next buyer of treasuries, which essentially enshrines the dollar, as this de facto, it extends its reserve currency hegemony much longer, right? So
I just want to say, instead of just the money rails, it's going to be like our economic rails, because there's no reason why some of what we have right now can't be done better on blockchains. Like even just title ownerships of a car.
Yeah.
It's just so much easier because if you have a centralized database, people can cross-reference things a lot easier.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many issues I run into right now when I'm trying to look up property ownerships, because it's part of my work sometimes, that like the government websites or their government registry can get outdated, or they can just not update correctly, or there can be a misfiling of something. So switching over to the blockchain for handling some of these things, even if the government agency is the one that put out the blockchain, so they have full control over it.
Yeah,
fine. That's okay. Whatever.
Yeah.
It could be fully centralized.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it could be fully centralized, but it's at least transparent where people can see it. You can see the flow of funds.
Right, and you can't have somebody accidentally file something or they lose a file.
Yeah.
They can easily transfer ownership of like a house or a car to the other person, and you don't need the people on the back end to actually do all of the work.
Yeah,
maybe you just need them to step in case mistakes happen, but blockchain technology is going to come through every part of our economic activity.
Bitcoin and money is extremely important to have. Like, this idea of money is like, to me, is like this most important thing underneath with Bitcoin, like store of value money. But then other things can be tokenized and put on chains, and they don't necessarily need to be on a super decentralized chain. It could be a more centralized chain or some variation of that, right? And something like a title that could be tokenized and put on chain. That's an example of a valuable asset that can live on a blockchain, right? And that you can transparently see, okay, it was sold here, it went here, it was sold there.
I mean, some companies are using immutable ledgers already. They might not be exactly blockchains, but that concept is already in play in some companies.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I have to say, I think Michael Saylor is probably playing out some of this with proving that there's a massive market of companies that are willing to go out and buy convertible bonds for MicroStrategy, and so I think there's precedent that he's setting that I think we could follow suit on. One thing that I do want to call out that I think is really tied to the executive order that I think is pretty exciting is we have millions and millions of acres of land that is completely idle, and tons of stranded energy that is not being tapped into. Now, what the executive order potentially opens up is the ability for a company to say, hey, I am willing to invest in putting 100,000 solar panels in Arizona on government land in order to essentially mine Bitcoin. And they can strike an agreement where 20% of that can go to the U.S. government.
You know who had that idea that recently was talking about something like this was Chamath Palihapitiya. from the All In Pod. He actually had said something very similar to what you're saying now. It's like, why shouldn't 5% of that revenue or whatever the number is go, like if a company wants to exploit this resource or do this or that, or the government is giving a grant to do something, why shouldn't they why shouldn't the taxpayer get some equity in that if they're taking the risk, right? If the taxpayer has to pay out and grant that money to this entity or whatever it may be, if the taxpayer is on the hook for the risk, why isn't the taxpayer getting that upside? You hit a couple of these, boom, that solves our debt problem. That solves all the other issues. I mean, it's just time to modernize, fix, root out these ancient systems and corruption. It's time. The technology exists. It's possible. We've got brilliant new entrepreneurs from the next generation coming. We need to fix all this shit, right? Because the ship is sinking unless we do something about it, right? And we've got solutions. We've got ideas. So, some of the dinosaurs that created this problem need to fade away, and it's time to have people from our generation step up into leadership roles and start tackling some of these problems, because we've got ideas, and there's
some
a lot
of the older people need to also step down. We've got people who are ancient still sitting in these positions, and they won't give up the power.
The Pelosi's and the McConnells and these fucking people, they just got to go.
Tripped and break a hip. I feel like I see those on Twitter all the time, where it's like someone fell over and broke a hip, and I'm like,
I mean, if they want to go. If they step back and then whoever gets elected, they try and be consultants just because they still think they probably still have some valuable information, how the system works at the very least. But just let the younger people take over. If you don't teach us how to do these new things, when you pass away, we're going to be in a free fall of just horrible confusion and whatnot.
The reality too is I think a lot of the smartest people have avoided politics for the longest time because it's too slow, it's too bureaucratic. You need to get too much consensus to make stuff happen. And I think what's cool about the Trump administration and sort of like Doge, Elon, and they're moving really fast. I mean, David Sachs said this too, right? They're moving at startup speed, and that gets other people really excited and want to.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head. What you just said is super important, right? This is a quote by, I believe, Plato that Paul pulled up here, and it says the heaviest penalty.
The second row on the right.
Let's see what he's got. So, or is this Socrates maybe?
The beautiful part about the idea you were talking about having the solar miners out, this is something like that with the blockchain technology, because it essentially be completely autonomous, where it works on its own and there's no one that needs to do anything essentially besides overlook it and make sure it's running properly.
So Plato's quote is, one of the penalties for refusing to participate in politics is that you end up being governed by your inferiors. It serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of civic engagement and the consequences of apathy towards political matters. So my variation of this quote, which I came to realize after my bank account started being shut down by the Biden administration and all this sort of shit that was happening, is that you might not be interested in politics, but politics is interested in you. Right.
Oh, so yeah. I usually say you don't care about politics, but politics cares about you.
Yeah.
Same thing.
So this is where we're at, right? So it's time to engage. So
well, to be fair, everything was working well enough so that the people that were the most productive didn't have to do that. They could be in the free market and provide so much more value because there's a limit to them.
Musk is a prime example of this.
Right,
he probably he just does not want to be doing what he's fucking doing right now, but it got so bad that they were like, hey, you can't launch your spaceships on the coast because we don't like your politics. Or, hey, you can't, hey, we're going to fine you $500,000 because you poured fresh water on the ground on an island. This is the type of fucking idiocy we're dealing with.
We're fining you $1 million because you're not hiring foreign employees, but he's not allowed to hire foreign employees because he's doing top secret research.
You just can't make up the absurdities of this bullshit. The motherfucker made literally the most electric cars possible, and then the Biden administration has this electric car vent, and he's sold 99% of all the electric vehicles that even exist, and they're like, nope, you're not invited. Only our special politically connected friends can come and present. And he puts some lady up from EV.
They have Biden
GE
doing a promo with a Jeep, an electric Jeep or something. Year later, Trump does the same thing, and the reaction of the people online is just Biden is good. He's great. He's promoting electric vehicles. Yeah. Trump is terrible. He's promoting electric vehicles.
These people have no brain cells left. It's just so sad.
There's no truth but power.
Yeah, that's true. Let's see here. Actually, go down, Paul. Go down to that. Go up. The one about I want to talk about nope, go down. You're going too fast. Let's see here. Oh yeah, this is going from Clint Russell. Interesting point. I know this has come up a lot. People there's a lot of comments about this whole idea of like using socialist policies to cap credit card rates. It's kind of like the whole, minimum wage thing where like they did this thing in Canada or in I said Canada, but I meant California. Same thing pretty much. Where they like stopped, they like were forcing people to pay more for Uber drivers or something like that. And then basically what happened is like people just completely stopped using that service. So like now they make nothing. They made no money. They're like, hey, this is the minimum wage, and we're making this the minimum wage for an order or whatever it was. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like after that happened, like all those jobs completely went away because we're like the free market's like we're just not going to pay for that. Like, sorry, it's the value of that is not worth the job. So you end up with a situation where you actually lose jobs because
something that I read that Apple had their credit card and they were paired with Goldman Sachs to do it.
Yeah.
But they stopped offering it because the way Apple did their app and everything, it helps people pay it off on time.
It does, yeah. I still have a
yeah.
Like a 10
so they shut it down because they weren't making.
I still
enough
have my
interest
card.
off
They might have got something. They might have got a different back end provider because I still have my Apple credit card line.
Yeah, they already offered it, so they can't not offer it anymore.
Yeah.
But they did
They
it.
do, yeah.
They changed it because they weren't getting enough interest because they were too effective in helping people manage their credit.
It shows you like, hey, you could pay more to make your interest less. And if you see the numbers, people are like, oh shit, I'll pay more. I don't want to pay that much interest. That's too funny.
But it's like incentivized to try and attack the people that are just
I mean, again, it's a business, right? Like, and I think Clint Russell does. He has this is a great post that kind of explains. It's like, would you lend a random person $1,000 for a year with no collateral if they promised to pay you back $1,100, knowing that with inflation you'd only receive about $50 in real returns, knowing that they could file bankruptcy and you lose everything? No, you would not. So when AOC and Luna cap credit card rates at 10%, don't be surprised when banks simply stop lending. So price controls are stupid and destroy the market signals necessary for a functioning economy. I've used credit cards for 20 years and never paid interest with this one neat trick. I pay it off at the end of the month. Stop asking for the government to protect you from yourself. It's retarded. I totally agree, right? Like, nobody's forcing you to get a credit card. If you're getting a credit card and you're carrying a balance on it, like, I've done it myself. I do it all the time. It's like, you might need to have that flexibility and you're willing to pay the interest for that month or whatever it is, right? Or however long. I mean, you're going to create a situation where you just don't have access to a credit card anymore. Like, you just won't have that as an option.
So Visa's making like 50% profit profit margin on it. So the answer is find a way to increase competition, because if anyone can put up $100 and they get back 200 afterwards, everyone's gonna be clamoring to get into that industry. So like try and figure out a way to open it up more so more people can participate. Yeah, it's probably there's probably all this crony capitalism around it, which makes it so only the fucking big banks can actually like successfully have like jump through all the hoops that the government has created to issue a credit card. So I'm sure if you really boil down the problem of why interest rates are so high, it's probably because crony capitalism has entrenched these massive entities, and the hoops for anybody to issue, a credit card for the average person are so high that you have to be, disaccredited, have 100,000 employees doing this and another 100 employees doing this, and jump through all these regulatory hoops. And it's made it to the point where there's only a couple companies that can afford that, and they just have a monopoly, kind of a monopolistic thing now. Yeah. To give the devil his due, I believe back in like the 70s and the 80s, was the Fair Credit Reporting Act or something. People would get credit cards and they wouldn't be diligent in actually explaining what's happening on the card and the interest rate they're getting charged and all these things. So the laws came into play saying, all right, if you're going to offer a credit card, you have to do these things to actually qualify and get protections. But the end result now is that when you get a credit card, you get a fucking booklet that's like this thick that has a bunch of legalese that not a single fucking person ever reads. So they didn't solve the problem. They actually just made it worse. I know. Now they made it even worse.
Now they make you scroll all the way down before you can click.
Oh, yeah. Do they do that? You have to scroll through 70 pages. Literally, like, half of our population can't even fucking read anymore because the Department of Education has been so incompetent and all the scores are going down. So like,
I'm just saying,
60, I think it's some crazy number of people are like illiterate. Like, it's just insane.
I'm just saying.
But even if you wanted to read it would make no sense.
I've tried to read it before. Like I've tried. I gave up after about like 10 minutes. I'm like, this is fucking so insane. Like, it should be the law that the average person has to under fucking stand what they're writing. So like, they can't get away with all this fucking bullshit that they do. I mean, it's just so saying, silly.
Like, we probably need to start fresh because all of these things were in a time when we were doing mostly pen and paper to figure everything out. And now that we have these wonderful little things that control our lives.
I'm taking the fucking, what's the guy from Argentina, Milei? I'm taking the fucking chainsaw to all of it. The regulations need to go away. It's time to figure out a new, more effective path forward because, the Fair Credit Reporting, whatever the fuck they call it, like, Nobody's reading any of that shit. Not a single person ever reads that whole long thing.
Agree.
And people that do can't even understand it. So it ain't working. All it does is cronyism that fucking creates a bigger moat. And I bet at the end of the day, if you go back and look at all this stuff, it's probably these 4 or 5 huge corporations that were lobbying to have these fucking laws passed so they could create this barrier to anybody else trying to get in the game. So I think that's probably more the problem. And there's a lot of things like that in society, right?
The problem with efforts like this is I think they just poll really well. So people are
do.
like,
It just sounds.
I want to cap it.
Yeah, it just sounds
reasonable.
good. Sounds good on the front end, but when you actually unpack it, it's like, oh, this just sounds good.
Although funny enough, if they do pass that and it gets capped, all it's going to do is now there's going to be a black market for loans, for credit card loans that'll let you do above 20% because no one can get funds anyways. So they'll go to blockchains because, all right, well, I can at least lend it.
Yeah. Well, honestly, the funny thing is if you go on DeFi and go on chain and you lend you're getting some decent yields if you know what the fuck you're doing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like you can get a loan on some of these DeFi platforms. So
and a lot of it is collateralized too. So there's like pools of where whatever's being loaned, like people post collateral, like they're posting Ethereum or posting wrapped Bitcoin or whatever it may be, and they can borrow off of that using a DeFi protocol. And if the person doesn't pay the interest on their loan, they just the platform, whether it's Aave or something like that, will literally sell the asset to pay back the person who is collecting interest. So it is pretty fascinating. There's a lot of cool, and this is why obviously blockchains are the future. There's so much cool smart contract stuff happening on some of these platforms. It literally is fascinating. All right, Paul, take us to our next take. What do you got for us? Go up a little bit. I think it was Canada files to look at it. Yeah, go down. This is an interesting one. Canada files to sell USD bonds, size undisclosed. Not going to be doing much of that in the future. Can you have Grok explain that post? I guess what they're doing is they're basically targeting the this is why stablecoins are so important, right? Because you've got these nation states that are now selling U.S. treasuries and not buying them, right? So we're losing globally the demand for debt, and as we should, right? We're running fucking $27 trillion in the hole. When you see somebody who just takes on more debt and it gets more unsustainable, would you keep giving them money? No. That's exactly what when they steal your reserves. If you have a political disagreement or there's a conflict over here that they don't like, and they're able to just seize your funds. Or sanction you or whatever. Why would you want to use their economic system? I mean, you're not. It's like most people don't realize that like the bank can just take your money. It's basically you're giving your money to the bank and then they're giving you like, hey, you can. It's technically not yours anymore. You just have a claim for it or something along those lines. So if more people understood that, they probably wouldn't have as much in the bank anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, the fact that the banks are allowed to consider that way is an absurd ruling.
It is
from a court case.
It's
ages
absurd.
Ago.
Absolutely absurd.
I
agree with you.
It's like if you went to a public storage place, put your couch in the box, and you came next month, and it says, "Hey, where's my couch?" Like, "Oh, we lent it out to somebody. We'll give you this other couch instead. It's fine."
Right.
Bullshit.
Yeah, I agree with you. What does Grok say? Canada's decision to sell U.S. dollar-denominated bonds, as reported by Zero Hedge, is part of a strategy outlined in Budget 2024 to maintain liquid foreign reserves above 3% of GDP, announced by the Department of Finance on March 10th, 2025, to diversify and stabilize its foreign currency reserves amid trade tensions with the U.S. This move coincides with escalating trade disputes, including U.S. President Donald Trump's imposition of 25% tariffs on Canadian imports effective March 2025, prompting, scroll down, Paul, in the chat. Yeah, in that chat, yeah. Prompting Canada to reconsider retaliatory measures and potentially impacting global markets. The bond sale with an undisclosed size follows Canada's last U.S. dollar bond issuance in April 2024, worth $3 billion, reflecting ongoing efforts to bolster financial sovereignty amid economic pressures from U.S. policies. So I'm not sure. Maybe this looks like this was already decided that they were going to do this, or it's unclear whether this is a response to the escalating trade tensions, but it's just another way for them to kind of like, hey, we're going to sell your bonds.
It's kind of hard to tell
with
some of these things because people can make these decisions a year ago.
Yeah, exactly.
And
just
then
convenient timing, right?
And then when it comes to actually happen, if they don't publicize it, no one knows about that. But now if they publicize it a bunch, like, oh, this is what Canada's doing because of Trump's tariffs, but it was in the works a year ago. So like
the first comment underneath says, Canada, crazily enough, is looking for USD to give it to other nations to plug gaps left by USAID funding. I am not making this up. That is wild. Canada is being taken by the globalist regime. WEF now runs Canada, and nothing good comes from that. Expect the Muslim refugees to be shipped in by the thousands. King Arthur. Well, I will say that the guy who just took over as the again BJ Dichter, who led the Canadian trucker convoy, was here a week or two ago, and he literally told me, he's like, hey, they're gonna appoint this Mark Carney guy. They've brought him back over to Canada from England. He was like a European guy who's like, they just brought him back to Canada. They're like, hey, he's been selected. He's gonna be the guy. And sure enough, he was totally right. They just installed this guy. They stepped down Trudeau and installed this fucking Carney, this total clown, and now he's back in charge. It's like they just move these people around and try to it's just crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Oh, here's a good take. Or here's a good one. This is interesting. So, have you guys been following this? Like, this is does anybody here lean? Does anybody here lean left that has a take on this? Because to me, this is just insane. It's all of these people just basically being sent a message, and they're all just fucking posting the same thing. I mean, do they
the Babylon Bee had a great article about this.
What was it? Was it the one with a picture of a parrot where they just put them all as parrots?
Yeah, it's like Democrats. Yeah, it was like Democrats in order to save money have just bought a bunch of parrots because they all say the same thing anyways. Or
I mean, that is insane. They just copy and paste the same message and post it all over X. I mean, I can't tell if they're just actors. Elon goes, you can see the ridiculous political puppet show for what it. Oh, Paul just waits until I start reading it and scrolls away from it. Well, you can see the ridiculous political puppet show for what it really is. They're just actors reading a script. I mean,
the reality is this strategy actually works extremely well in the 90s when it's
really okay.
You don't have because
people can't see
real-time
people can't
journalism,
see, and people also there's a limitation of visibility, but it allows you to have a unified message regardless of the state that the person lives in.
But you'd think that you think that at least you have the unified message, but you actually put in 5 minutes of effort to say it in your own words. You're told what to say.
Well,
but
no, because that's probably been workshopped.
Because they're so stupid they can't even do that. I don't know.
That's probably been workshopped. This is going to be the most effective message, but then they don't account for the fact in the current day where I can check against everyone very easily, and I can just check messages and see if everyone's posting the same thing.
I mean, this can't be just. This has to be done by design. This can't They have to have been just told, hey, just post.
Right, no, they're all using the same playbook, but it's the playbook from the 90s, and it just doesn't work.
I just don't understand. I mean, I just feel hey, this is the messaging, these are the talking points, but say it in your own words, right? I feel that would be a little bit better.
Some of these congressmen,
but maybe they just think they're so stupid that they can't do that. I don't know. I really don't know.
I remember this interview where one of these congressmen was worried about so many army troops going onto the island and the island capsizing.
What?
Yes, that was a question.
New York governor.
I don't remember who it is. I just know it was a politician.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was in New York.
That was one of the things he was worried about, was all the military people going onto this island and it weighing one side down and it was going to flip over.
What? That can't be real, dude. Stop.
No, I'm dead serious. They are not smart people. They are charismatic people. There's a difference.
Oh my God.
I mean, I used to live in New York City, and I think one of the interesting things is I would have the same debate with everyone that I met with on the left because it's the same talking points. It's the same 5 things that they're going to bring up, gay rights and so this is one of the things I think they're really good at. The right does, I think, a poor job being aligned. We have a lot of different ideas, and I think we could do a better job orchestrating. And I think Trump is doing a good job marshaling.
Thing about the right now is that you've literally got this coalition of all these different groups, and they just don't agree on everything, but they're they agree on the fact that those people over there are so fucking insane that we're gonna come together for the common good and we'll debate ideas internally and we might disagree on
how
X.
It should be. It should be open discussion.
Also, the right is just fed up at this point with a lot of things.
Yeah.
One of the things that Michael Malice was saying he was worried about was when they started actually doing the deportation and putting out the sob stories. He was worried the right was gonna fall for it and feel bad about it.
Yeah.
No one moved. No one's it's just okay, we're deporting criminals. I don't care. They're criminals. Get them out of my country. They're illegal. They're illegal aliens, and they're charged with criminal acts and whatnot.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's surprised by that happening. I think that's what was voted for overwhelmingly. I mean, everybody knew that Trump had a very hardline stance on this issue.
Back in the 90s, they might have flipped. We're not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
It was like the Jack Posobiec. Frankly,
sorry to interrupt you, Alessandro. I know you were unpacking a couple points there, but
no, but I think just one point is there's a reason why it's mostly Democrats that will switch to being independent and leave the party. You've got Joe Manchin, who took a big stand, I think 4 years ago or 3 years ago. ultimately was the only Democrat to vote with the Republicans, ended up leaving the party. And so, like, the reality is, I think the left is just, here's the narrative, here's what we have to run with. And if you're not comfortable with that, you're sort of totally left alone. And so, and I mean, Biden maybe is the best example of being abandoned halfway through the campaign trail.
Oh, yeah, that was wild. I mean,
if you don't play the game, you're out of the game.
That was wild.
All right, Paul, you got a video for us?
This is the guy right here. In a 2010 House Armed Services Committee hearing, Congressman Hank Johnson expressed concern that stationing more U.S. troops on Guam might cause the island to tip over and capsize. This cannot be real. That has to be a joke. I mean, can you?
There's a video.
7 miles wide at the least widest place on the island, and about 12 miles wide on the widest part of the island. And I don't know how many square miles that is. Do you happen to know?
I don't have that figure with me, sir. I can certainly supply it to you if you'd like.
Yeah, my fear is that the whole island will become so overly populated that it will tip over and capsize.
No, this can't be real.
Yeah, that's real.
I can't believe this is real.
We don't anticipate that. The Guam population, I think, currently about 175,000.
I love how he just goes, we don't anticipate that. That was about the nicest way you could respond to something so idiotic. So
that's what I'm telling you.
I mean,
they're not smart people.
That is just,
they're charismatic people.
George Soros wants useful idiots.
Useful idiots, yeah. I mean, that's something. That's something right
trolling.
there. He's got to be trolling. He's got to be
trolling.
trolling. Come on, man. Come on, man. Every time. Come on. That's crazy. I've never heard anything like that before in my life. I
Really? I
still can't accept that's real.
That was pretty big at the time. I don't remember where I was
Come on,
saying
man.
it. But.
So
Crazy.
Alessandro wanted to talk about.
Ooh, what does
BitX
Alexandra
for
want to
a
talk
moment,
about? All
and
right, let's talk
apparently
about
they
it.
had an exciting week. Do you want to touch on that, Alessandro?
Yeah, somebody found a block again with a BitX this week.
Yeah, another BitX.
This is like meme coins for Bitcoin maximalists. That's my take on this.
No, I mean, I think this is pretty cool. So basically,
It is fucking cool.
I want to give a big shout out to Scott for really like kickstarting the whole sort of BitX community, but it's all open source. So
What is BitX?
Yeah,
Okay, so I'll break it down. It's basically like if you look at a modern miner, right? So actually, you know what, Jeff, can you go grab the miner? Just grab that miner, bring it in, put it up carefully, put it on the table. Grab the S19 out there. We'll break it down. We'll actually give an in-depth explanation of what we're talking about here.
I mean, up there it looks like a Raspberry Pi on a hard drive with.
So it's kind of what it is. So I'm gonna break down kind of exactly what's happening here, and then people will understand it better.
Okay. Shoot.
So a regular Bitcoin miner uses tons of electricity, right? It's like this big, and we're gonna bring one in so you can see it. But inside the Bitcoin miner is all of these boards, and each board. So yeah, but you can put it right there in front of the camera so people can see it. Set it down very carefully if you can. It's because of the glass table. But inside that, inside the miner is actually a bunch of boards that have a bunch of little chips on them, right? And all those little chips do, like all they do is hash the SHA-256 algorithm, which is what mines Bitcoin. There's 4 boards, and every miner version is like different. They add more, they take some away, and they make more efficient chips. But the key to think about is that you're powering all those boards with all those chips on, right? And on those boards are these little chips. And what BitX is essentially doing is instead of putting, for example, 100 chips in a miner, they're taking that one chip and they're actually powering it with a USB drive, right? Or however this works. And, you've got where, this thing hashes 100, 200 terahashes, whatever it may be. Those little chips only hash maybe, 1 terahash, 2 terahash, 3 terahash, whatever it is.
I think the earliest version was about half a terahash.
Yeah, half a terahash.
And the latest is probably like 1.5 terahash.
There you go. So that's exactly the point, right? So it's taking one of those 100 chips out of there. So this is like you're playing with if you're solo mining with this thing, you're just playing the lotto, right? And if you're not solo mining, you're only getting a couple pennies a day, if that, right? Yeah. It's like the same, but it's fun, right? It is fun. So it's literally like playing the lottery. It's like that's why I said it's like meme coins on Bitcoin, because it's like you're just gambling, right? And it's fun to do so. But you also are submitting a little bit of hash to the network, which is pretty cool. And But yeah, that's essentially all you're doing. You're taking like 1/100th of a real miner or like a large miner, and you're just putting a very small version of that, a micro miner, and you're plugging it in, right? So, but it is a cool way for the plebs to participate, to have fun. And yeah, I mean, if you hit that lottery, if you hit that lotto ticket, like you're going to get paid, right? So, occasionally some person hits that lottery, and that's what happened.
So did this happen recently?
So a couple days ago, basically, I think three days ago.
I think I heard
it's the second time. So a BitX won last year.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking
this is the second time in I think 8 months that a BitX has won the Bitcoin lottery and gotten the whole block.
Wow, and that's something. Yeah. It's like 4 coins right now.
3.125 plus whatever
so
I think it's 3.125 plus whatever the transaction fees for that 10-minute period or roughly 10-minute period
let's
was.
Let's just say 3 because we can times that by 80 a lot easier. So that's $240,000.
Yeah, it's probably somewhere between 250 and 400,000 is typically what the person hits. So
lucky him.
Yeah, but it's cool. I mean, this is basically a machine you can just have at your desk. It's pretty silent. You can basically work away and have this thing just sort of like
it's mining. It's mining a couple watts of power on that one chip. And
I think it's 15 watts. So it's like
a
light bulb. You're spending $1.50 a month, and you have the opportunity to potentially win 3.125 Bitcoin.
There you go. It's a Powerball. It's what it is.
Yeah, that dude's return on his investment is perfect.
But the thing I want to call out that I think is cool is like, we can sort of write off as like, okay, it's trivial. It's a small amount of hash rate. But what's cool about this is it actually allows millions of people who are interested in mining
to get a taste.
But don't have like the know-how or don't want to deal with the noise of a huge industrial miner in their basement. And so they can get this. They can contribute to the decentralization of Bitcoin, and doesn't cost them that much. And it really doesn't take that much maintenance.
No, you're 100% right. I mean,
you have it there, and it just works.
It is a great educational tool, I think, as well. Like that's what my favorite part about it is that if you think you're going to get rich by buying one of these things, the chances are it's not going to happen, right? Obviously, congratulations to the people that have won the lottery and hit a block, but that's really not what this. And this is a fun way to contribute to to Bitcoin and to be a part of that network and to also learn about mining, right? So I've been recommending before. I would recommend people go buy an S9 off of eBay or whatever to like learn an older generation miner. But now it's like I recommend buying a BitX, right? It's like, hey, you want to learn about mining? Like go buy a BitX. Like I got this for my son to kind of set up and and learn about mining. But like now, like hey, let's take a look at a BitX, and you can just plug it into your computer and you can set up the miner and set up your wallet and set up the payout and kind of do all that fun stuff.
It's super easy. You do it all through Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. It's really straightforward.
Yeah, pretty neat.
And again, it's all open source. So basically, like you can hack on the board, make changes, and you can even mess with the firmware. Like I love it. One of my favorite things is just like screwing around with the firmware, seeing what it does to hash rate.
Does it let you actually like overclock it and do all that kind of fun stuff? Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, you can screw with core voltage, so how much voltage is going to the ASIC. Okay. You can mess with the frequency of the ASIC, and so it's a really cool way to unpack like how does mining work.
I love that. I think you just hit the nail on the head. I mean, that's a big part of it. Like whatever you're doing on that little chip, like that's what you're doing with mining firmware. If you're overclocking or undervolting your miner, it's just a microcosm of that. So absolutely a great way to. You know what I think we're gonna do? I think for our local meetup, we'll get one of these and we'll give it away at the end. I think that's a great idea. Or we'll just have whole session on it to teach people about it. Yeah. And then we'll just we'll lotto ticket the lottery ticket at the very end of the meetup. That's a good idea.
I love it.
Maybe we'll have you as the speaker, Alessandro. You can come and talk about the BitX.
I'm happy to speak about it. I mean, I first discovered the BitX because I was actually trying to run an S9 on solar panels.
Really?
And we had stripped out 2 of the boards because there's like 3 different boards in the S9. And even with just one board
it's still taking too much power.
3 solar panels, the thing would only run for like an hour and a half. And so we had jerry-rigged it onto a car battery. It was it was a whole like and so we serendipitously started playing around with the BitX, and it's you can run that whole thing on just 100 watt solar panel.
BitX needs to hire you.
It's no. I mean, it's an open source community, so
I know, I'm
it's
just laughing.
You go to the Discord, you can sort of throw different crazy ideas out there. I mean, they know I have a bunch of crazy ideas, but a lot of people have learned a ton about electrical engineering and coding just by going to the Discord and asking questions.
Wow,
and sort of hacking around. So
hell yeah, awesome. What else you got for us, Paul? This was scroll up a little bit. Let's scroll to the top of the feed. I think we went over these takes last time, Paul. These are old takes from Wednesday.
We can't just scroll over it without at least commenting.
we already talked about this one. Go up. Oh yeah, prices of eggs. Let's show that one. That's a good one right there. Yeah. So this is fascinating. So if you actually show the chart here, from the redheaded libertarian, she talked about it. She goes, but you can see the price of eggs when when they shut down factories, they killed all the chickens, did all this stuff. Of course, the cost of eggs is going to go up. But over the past week, from the March 4th, roughly from like March 4th, past 10 days or so, the price of eggs has gone down 50% almost. So
there was actually kind of an article in some Florida magazine or newspaper that people are switching over to quail eggs because the chicken eggs were too expensive.
Are you going to show your quail eggs here?
No, but that was still a real story.
Oh, I believe it. For all who don't know, Stonebreaker, the man, does have quails running around making eggs.
Yep. Wow. Yeah, I don't care about egg prices.
He hasn't brought me any to test, so I'm a little disappointed. But
so that's why the price is dropping. It's all you.
It's all you.
Yeah. We're leaving the demand on the chicken egg.
Go up, Paul. So she says, it turns out when you don't manufacture a food crisis by culling 100 million chickens, the egg supply goes up and the cost goes down. Next take.
Wait, did it say like the peak price was $8.17 in February?
Something like that, yeah.
I like this little
like
this is this year.
That's February.
This is eggs prices have continued to skyrocket after they killed all those chickens because of the bird flu or whatever.
That's perfect right there.
They go up. We're out of eggs. They kill all the chickens. Trump starts feeding the chickens. Still no eggs. What a failure. Then the chickens came and they started
doing what chickens do.
Yeah. This is a good one right here. Talk about the Genius Act. Pull that one up, Paul. Actually play this clip. So this is Tim Scott and Bill Hagerty from this. Start it over, yeah.
Thank you, Chairman Scott, and I want to thank you for your leadership in bringing this legislation to the floor.
Pause this for a second.
Modernizes countless industry participants.
I believe this. So Senator Tim Scott has taken over Elizabeth Warren because obviously the Congress has swung to the Republican side. So he's now the leader of this commission, the banking. I believe it's like the banking committee, and now he's in charge. Got rid of Elizabeth Warren, who has been awful. She's terrible, and now we're actually getting stuff done. So this is brilliant to see. But let's listen to this. So shout out to Tim Scott. He's been fantastic. But let's hear
Chairman
Bill Hagerty.
Scott, and I want to thank you for your leadership in bringing this legislation
Warren's
to the
still
floor.
there. I thought I saw
She's still there, but she's the minority member now.
The United States can't be left behind. Stablecoins can actually play a pivotal role in spurring modernization, whether it's improving transaction efficiency, freeing up working capital, or driving U.S. Treasury demand. The benefits of a clear regulatory framework for stablecoin are immense. I want to acknowledge the hard work of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle who've worked tirelessly on this bill and have consulted with countless industry participants, academic experts, and government stakeholders to put together a truly bipartisan effort. And I want to underscore that the current draft is, in the manager's package that's associated with it that we're going to vote on today, will address the many claims that were lodged by the ranking member today, and they will clarify the fact that many of the claims simply just aren't applicable here. The Genius Act has gained this bipartisan support because it presents common sense rules that protect consumers, promote competition, and foster innovation. It's time we provide the clarity and stability that our country and its innovators so desperately need. Before I conclude, I'd just like to note that Senator Brooks has also raised an adjustment to ensure the proper technical application of consumer protection laws. There are no loopholes created in this bill, and if there are any technical fixes necessary, I look forward to working with Senator Brooks and my colleagues on this committee to address them. I also want to just finally say thank you to my staff, Luke Pettit, John DeGravio, Matt Benoit, and Ethan Finley, to the Banking Committee staff, and to the personal staffs of all of my colleagues here who've worked so hard on this bill. Thanks to all of you very much.
What a great clip. I mean, he just pretty much hit the nail on the head on all those issues. I thought that was extremely well said. And you can see that with Tim Scott's leadership, I mean, the Senate Banking Committee really gets it, which is nice to see. It's nice to see people like Elizabeth Warren no longer in control of this type of stuff. And I think this is going to really help unleash the innovation that comes with a stablecoin regime and the stability there, and this, like he even mentioned, demand for treasuries, all these different systemic things, super important super important for the United States going forward. So love to see this. So Senator Bill Haggerty, he says, I'm pleased to see my Genius Act successfully pass out of the Senate Banking Committee with bipartisan support. That's another key. So it's bipartisan support. So it's nice to see a lot of the minority party members crossing the aisle to be a part of this. And, got to give credit where credit's due. This legislation is a critical first step in establishing a safe and pro-growth regulatory framework that will unleash innovation and advance the president's mission to make America the world capital of crypto. I look forward to seeing this bill pass the Senate in the near future and ultimately signed into law by President Trump. Love that. You guys have any thoughts on that?
What is the Genius Act?
So I believe the Genius Act is a stablecoin legislation that basically allows different market participants, to banks, whoever, to engage in issuing stable coins, and offers a legitimacy and rules-based framework instead of just a bunch of veiled threats from all these regulatory agencies and regulation by enforcement, the absolute chaos and corruption we saw over the past 4 years. This basically says, like, hey, these are the rules, these are the guidelines, and now the game is on. Go play ball. Go be a capitalist, right? Go provide value to society.
I believe banks can buy Bitcoin now too with the Genius Act. I think there's a stipulation where.
Can you, Paul? Can you pull up Grok and ask what the major tenets of the Genius Act are? That's actually a good question. I don't know if it had just to do with stable coins or if it also had to do with Bitcoin. But if it's both, fantastic. Let's find out.
Cynthia just posted about it, and there's quite a few people who aren't so happy about it because they think it's tailored to the XRPs of the world.
Yeah,
but let me
let's just see what it says here. Major tenets, rather. Yeah, major tenets. So, guiding and establishing national innovation for U.S. stablecoins. So, I think this is more focused on stablecoins. But let's see, licensing and regulatory oversight. Only permitted payment stablecoin issuers can issue stablecoins in the U.S. These include subsidiaries of insured depository institutions regulated by federal banking agencies like the Federal Reserve, and federal qualified non-bank issuers overseen by the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, or OCC. A dual framework allows smaller issuers below a $10 billion market cap threshold to operate under state regulation, while larger issuers fall under federal oversight, ensuring scalability and flexibility. So I like this dual-pronged approach where, like, if you're if you want to get in the game and start, up to $10 billion, if you issue up to $10 billion worth of stables, you can participate and be in the game. You can start up, but once you reach that threshold, once you cross that threshold, right, it becomes more systemically important. So there are going to be additional oversight and regulation that's involved in that, right? Because if a bunch of people have which I think is good, right? We want to have, if you are custodying the funds and you are a custodian, you should be regulated. If you're not holding the funds directly, if I'm responsible for custodying your funds, and your funds, I should be regulated. I'm holding all of your money. There should be some accountability to me based on whatever the arrangement is, right? So we do want that, but this is kind of like, hey, 10 billion or less, and you want to issue a stable, play around, experiment. You can operate just under a state supervision. But once you get higher than that point, like the USDTs, the USDCs of the world, we could come to a situation where we've got catastrophic risk if there's not kind of oversight there, making sure, hey, you've issued $100 billion or $1 trillion worth of USDC. Do you have the treasuries and the liquidity to actually meet those reserve demands? There needs to be, third-party audits to say, okay, well, they've got $2 trillion worth of value here that they can use to, if everybody wants to convert their USDT or whatever USDC back into physical dollars, then they're able to do that.
I think what's going to happen, though, is similar to what happened when we were getting off the gold standard, is once it was required that there was gold to be backing every single dollar, people kept the dollars because it was just more convenient to transact in it. Mm-hmm. So we might do the same thing here with the US dollar.
I think so.
It'll just become so much easier to use a USDT or USDC, whichever, that people aren't going to bother going backwards anymore.
I don't know why they would. Why would you want to have money in a bank account that could be seized from you or whatever when you can just have a wallet that has your funds, right? I mean, at least for, again, there's all this argument to be made to diversify some of your risk, have a custodian here, which I think makes a lot of sense. But money that you're spending or holding when you learn custody and the population gets more educated on how blockchains work and how cryptography, private key, public key, that stuff works. I think that we're definitely going to see that continue to grow. But what I really like here is that stablecoin issuers must maintain one-to-one reserves, backing each stablecoin with high-quality liquid assets like U.S. dollars or Treasury bills. That's the key. And again, these issuers, of course, they have to maintain some level of liquidity in short-term commercial paper or physical, just hold the dollars one-to-one. But their whole revenue model is based on getting the spread of interest, right? Getting that interest spread. That's their revenue model. So they're going to be buying government debt to collect, they've got $1 trillion of U.S. Treasury that pays 5% a year. So pretty damn good business. They're making, $50 billion a year just sitting on that treasuries. I mean, that's genius. I love this too. Monthly audits by public accounting firms and transparent disclosure of reserve compositions and redemption policies are mandated to ensure trust and stability. So far, this all makes great sense. I think that is well thought out. There's an understanding there. Continue to go down, Paul. Consumer protection and risk management. Issuers must adhere to bank-like standards, including capital, liquidity, and risk management requirements, as well as compliance with the Bank Secrecy Act, anti-money laundering, and sanctions laws. So personally, I'm not so happy. I think, this whole anti-money laundering regime, the KYC AML regime, does way more harm than good. And I also personally believe it's unconstitutional, but we won't have to go down that rabbit hole. But you do want to make sure that they do have good standards to monitor the capital, to retain liquidity in case people want to redeem for the actual underlying asset, and risk management requirements. Customer assets are segregated from issuer funds. So this is a huge one, right? Protecting them in case of insolvency, and stablecoins are not classified as securities, clarifying their role as payment instruments. Super important. I think that had Congress acted sooner, had we had this legislation sooner, we wouldn't have had blow-ups like what happened with FTX. If legitimate players or banks, whatever, that have custody assets for customers for generations, if they were allowed to engage and participate, we wouldn't have Sam Bankman-Fried having all these assets and then not backing it one-to-one and doing all this stuff. This was all forced because of government incompetence, of not staying ahead of the curve, not being educated, not passing legislation like this, right? Because if you really want to protect consumers, and you've got an industry where third parties are holding all of these funds, assets, securities, commodities, whatever they may be, crypto asset, and those entities don't have proper, regulatory oversight because they're holding customers' funds. You've got you're creating a situation of like what we had with FTX, right? What we've had with all these exchange blowups, right? So they're inadequate. They're inadequate. They've been completely inadequate to deal with these problems, and these problems are not going away. They're only going to compound every time this industry continues to grow over time. It's we're over trillions of dollars of value now. I think that stuff like this is important. Restrictions on algorithmic stablecoins. The act imposes a temporary ban on endogenously collateralized algorithmic stablecoins, requiring a Treasury-led study within 1 year of passage to assess the risks before allowing compliant issuance. This reflects caution about unbacked or volatile stablecoin models. I think this is also good, but it kind of leaves the door open for, hey, is something actually working? Maybe we'll consider it, right? But at the same time, it's like, look what happened with Terra Luna. Look what happened so far. The history, for the most part, of algorithmic stablecoins has been fraught with risk and disaster. Now,
so
will there
another example would be DAI on that one, right?
DAI's been done very well.
Right.
It still has it's retained its peg. It hasn't failed. It has good mechanisms in place. But again, when you're doing something, when you're issuing an algorithmic stablecoin, there's always a risk that whatever mechanism creates the peg will fail eventually, right? Like what happened with UST.
Right, but
which was
with
Terra
them
Luna.
putting a ban on it,
I don't think they're putting a ban on it. They're actually even saying
temporary ban.
Oh, it's a temporary ban, but it said with a study for 1 year or something along those lines.
But that's going to tank DAI, because if it's banned, then people are going to flee from it because there's uncertainty with it. So why hold the DAI when you can just switch over to you?
Go back to that. I think what they're saying here is not so much that it's banned. So it says
poses a temporary ban.
But I think that's for.
So DAI is an example of one of those. So this temporary ban will.
But I don't know if it's. I think it might be banned on issuing to U.S. customers in the U.S. I'm not sure exactly. I would like to understand more about that because DAI's existed for a long time. It already exists. It's not going anywhere. I don't think it's.
I mean, maybe one of their.
I think what they're. Yeah, I think what they're saying is if a U.S. company, bank, whatever, wants to issue a algorithmic stablecoin as opposed to a
straight pegged stablecoin.
to a reserve-backed stablecoin. It says no, you can't do that. And then Paul, can you look that up in another window so we can keep unpacking everything here? International reciprocity. A revised tenet expands rules for overseas stablecoins, requiring the Treasury to establish reciprocal agreements with foreign jurisdictions within 2 years. These agreements ensure foreign issuers meet U.S. standards for reserves, supervision, and compliance, enhancing global interoperability. I think this is brilliant as well. It says, hey, if somebody wants to issue a stablecoin in Europe, in wherever you're at in the world, Sweden, Switzerland, wherever, and they want to issue a U.S.-backed stablecoin, they need to follow the rules that the United States Congress, they need to be bilaterally aligned here. If you want to use our global reserve currency to do something, you should be aligned with, because these assets can flow all over the world into anybody's wallets, we need to have our stories straight. We need to have our rules straight. Interesting idea there as well. That way there's not two different standards that exist for these things, right? People follow the United States lead when it comes to a lot of these things, and instead of the U.S., which we've done for the past 4 years, which is tuck our heads in the sand and let other nations and other countries make the rules for the future of money and the future of finance and the future of technology. Now we're saying, hey, we are establishing and taking a leadership role here. These are the rules. If you want to use our dollar, we need to collaborate and make sure that everything is aligned, because we can't have U.S.-backed stablecoins going out to all these people and potentially have problems if they're not reserve-backed properly. I don't see an issue with that, but interesting to maybe someone else has another take on it. I don't know.
What are the reasons people are upset about this?
I don't know, but let's go down to the number 6, Paul, and then maybe he can find somebody being upset about this. So enforcement and compliance. Issuers must have technology to freeze, seize, or block transactions if legally ordered. Strengthening enforcement against illicit finance. Non-compliance can lead to penalties, potentially including criminal charges, signaling a serious approach to regulatory adherence. I think that this is already the case with USDT and USDC. I mean, when they find fraud and crime, they're already able to freeze it. They're already able to stop it. And I think this is it's a nice compromise, right? Because people that need to have that protection to live, that are buying $50, $60, like nobody gives a fuck about that. It's serious organized crime. I think they got one of these hackers who converted everything into a stable coin. He got all this ETH or whatever, and he could convert it to stable coin, and they instantly froze it and got the money back for people. I thought that was really cool. Interesting, right?
So I was looking for Cynthia Loomis's post, but she apparently deleted it. It was there yesterday, but she just mentioned the Genius Act, and the comments underneath were essentially just saying that, hey, this is kind of diverting away from the Bitcoin Act, the Bitcoin reserve strategy that she is, legislating and lobbying for.
Yeah, no, they're welcome to that opinion, but right, I think that's ridiculous.
You can have both.
Of course, yeah, you can have both, right? Like, the scarcity mindset is silly. I mean, the dollar is not going anywhere anytime soon. I think it's going to continue to be debased and lose value over time when it comes to Bitcoin terms. And I think the dollar is down 99.9% relative to Bitcoin over its inception, right? Like the dollar's already lost 99.9% of its value. The dollar's hasn't gone away. It's still here, right? Like it still exists. It's going to continue to be debased. And hopefully that happens very slowly over time, which is what we've been accustomed to, and we don't have any hyperinflation, which will fuck over and screw a lot of people up, right? So we got to get the dollar fixed. We got to get our affairs in order. We've got to get some controls put in place. I don't know what the Trump administration is doing. I think they should back the dollar with Bitcoin. I really do. Like that. If it was up to me, that's what they would do. Maybe some form of gold and Bitcoin, right? Like back the dollar by that basket, right?
But you don't want to jump the gun on something like that, because then other countries will follow suit. So
yeah,
finding a way to ensure that you can build your Bitcoin store without necessarily coming out publicly and saying like, this is the move we're going to take, I think is pretty smart. I mean, we're seeing a game
theory. Talking game theory.
Why even bother backing the dollar in Bitcoin? Just hold Bitcoin.
I think you should do both, right? I don't think they're mutually exclusive, because right now the dollar just has it exists all over the world. It's the global reserve currency, right?
Bitcoin exists all over the world too.
There are benefits to there's so many different levels to this, but I will say that if the whole world started using Bitcoin on the base layer right now, it would not work. So Bitcoin is like this base layer of money, right? So there's only a block every 10 minutes. Like everybody could not use Bitcoin in the world right now, right? we need time to build these other layers. Lightning Network is an example, but all these other layers of money that will exist on top of Bitcoin's base layer, it's going to take time to do, right? But the dollar could essentially be one of those layers on top of Bitcoin, right? Like if you find a way to, have like instead of a gold-backed dollar, you have a Bitcoin-backed dollar, right? And we have a way to do something like that. I think that would be interesting and cool, right? And I think optionality, and a lot of people miss this. A lot of people don't I don't want the world to just have one money. I think it's important for people to have options, right? Different systems. Like I have no problem with all these different experiments, or even other blockchains that aren't necessarily money but have money like properties, right? Like we have all sorts of stuff like that, like collectibles, collectors items, precious metals, different things that you could convert to money if you needed the liquidity, stocks, or even another example. Like all these different things I think are important, and that's part of a free market. That's part of capitalism. That's part of freedom. Like let's have this experiment. Let's have that experiment. Ethereum is digital oil and Solana is this. And I think that all that stuff is interesting, and, it's nice to have options, right?
I mean, I think if I play out 200, 300 years, what happens, I have to envision that there is just Bitcoin, or there is just one monetary currency for Earth. And I think part of what makes me sort of come to that conclusion is we used to have thousands of different currencies. Every different country or small village would have its own unique little bit of currency. And that's steadily changed over time to be based on towns, based on countries. So I think we're going to continue to see that play out. I don't think we can move there as fast as I think you were alluding to with moving there right away. But I do think that
I didn't say move there right away. I'm just saying if we're going to have a US dollar backed in Bitcoin, why not just go with the Bitcoin? And yes, we had thousands of different currencies, but around the 1800s, everyone had pretty much switched over to gold. Everyone was using the same thing.
But they were still their own currencies backed by gold.
No, you could still go and get them redeemable. The currency was still redeemable for gold.
Yeah.
The origin of the exchange rate was just, $1 US was 1/20th an ounce of gold, and a French, franc? I think that's what they use, was, I don't know, half an ounce or whatever it was. Yeah. I don't know what it is.
But you still had
that was the exchange rate. It was just $1 here and 1 franc here. How much gold does each one get you?
But then you had. I mean, there was different currencies, different markets, and obviously we've gone to this thing where the dollar is not backed by anything at this point. But if you look at history, it was even the Great British Pound is probably the oldest surviving fiat currency. At one point it was backed by precious. It was called the pound sterling, right? But that association has been lost over time. So I think even in a Bitcoin denominated world, you can get. You can have other currencies built on top of that base layer. And I think I don't know if we'll get to what you just said, but I can definitely envision this idea of multiple currencies backed by Bitcoin and gold, or some form of some blending.
Yeah, that's
of that.
my point though, is I don't see a point to having multiple currencies if we can have one underlying measurement, accounting measurement, or however you want to phrase it.
Yeah, I just think
it's
good.
Gives countries flexibility.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little flexibility there.
I think if you need to inject capital into a country, you can do that. And so you just have flexibility when you have your own currency. I think ultimately you want a reserve behind the scenes that is backed by something truly finite.
Yeah.
But it's hard to say governments will entirely move away from their own currency, because it does provide some nice advantages for you to make quick decisions.
But I don't see the point of that, because I'm a free market proponent, and I don't want the government to be able to just quickly create some currency out of thin air and put their thumb on the scales in arbitrary ways.
Yeah, I mean, not only is this just a monetary I mean, this is a political cultural, for example, look at the Japanese, they know what the government's doing. The government's been massively debasing the currency, and they consider it a patriotic duty. They're willing to pay that tax of debasement. It's kind of fucking wild, but I spoke to somebody about this the other day. It's they realize what's happening. They realize the government's printing money to do stuff, and they the way their culture operates is hey, we have a collective responsibility to our society, so we're willing to let our bonds be worth, essentially be nothing, and let the government print money. It's crazy, but that is what happens with the yen, right? So I think governments having that option, and then at the end of the day, give the people an option if they don't want to be a part of that, to just have Bitcoin. No one's stopping you from holding Bitcoin, but maybe there are certain advantages to using a.
My point
we're way out on the curve here,
but the whole, I don't remember the name of it, but the good money chases out the bad.
Yeah, you're talking about Gresham's law.
That one, thank you.
Yeah. So but
That's my point. Is the Bitcoin the superior money would chase out all of the other currencies?
But I think Gresham's law is actually reverse. Paul, can you look up Gresham's law real quick? I think it's the opposite of what you just said.
Oh no, I think
it's the bad money chases out the good, because people want to use the bad money instead of the good money. So so bad money drives out good. It's the opposite of what you said, which is like people want to spend the fiat currency. They don't want to spend the Bitcoin, which is they want to have that as like savings reserve. And a lot of people might not like this in the Bitcoin community, but if you look at the fundamentals of Bitcoin is like, why would you spend your Bitcoin, right? Like people need to spend Bitcoin for everything. Like look at the monetary fundamentals and characteristics.
But it's saying here, they hoard the good money, coins with higher gold content.
Yeah.
They circulate the bad ones with lower gold content. But Bitcoin doesn't have that problem because you can't like mint a different Bitcoin coin that has a less amount of Bitcoin.
But I'm just talking about you can have different, fiat currencies floating on different pegs relative to Bitcoin or gold or some peg of both of those things. I mean, there's all sorts of potential, maybe one society doesn't allow that. They won't allow their government to do it. Maybe another society says, we accept this. This is part of our collective duty, right? And I think that's important for the market optionality.
Are going to collapse.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we ultimately want to have choice. And so
choice. I like that, yeah.
If there's governments that choose that, hey, we want to run things with our own currency, I think it's fine for them to have that ability to make that decision. But I do think that having stuff be backed by Bitcoin is a smart sort of end game for us all.
Yeah,
I think you're conflating the two things there, because you can pay with multiple different ways. I could go hand you an Apple stock and you can hand me, I don't know, your iPad or whatever the value would be. You're still measuring it based on the US dollar, the price of this Apple stock versus the price of whatever I'm buying off of you. So I still have a variety of currencies available to me, but everything is still measured by the US dollar at the moment. So my assertion is that everything would still be measured by the Bitcoin amount. And we can still change. I could still give you ETH for something. How do we define the value of that would be based on backing everything with Bitcoin.
I think Bitcoin as a unit of measure becomes increasingly more interesting and more important over time. But I don't think that, and I think that will shift. I think we will start looking at things from a Bitcoin standard when we look at like housing prices, and we can do that now. Although I guess like the time frame is a little limited. But I do think that like that doesn't preclude governments from still being able to have their own currency and people continuing to transact. I mean, the reality is Bitcoin based
layer. It's going to depend on how much faith people have on that government currency. I could issue a currency. It has no value, and the government can issue a currency. They had to do end around to try and get people to accept the fiat currency instead of the dollars, because before, if you used to try and pay off your debts with fiat as currency, you were run out of town. Back in the day.
Ultimately, I mean, government currency is backed by power, and the military's might.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the only way people accepted it was because of legal tender laws.
Yeah. Again, I think Bitcoin offers an opt-out to the system, right? So if people don't want to store their wealth in fiat currency, they don't have to anymore, right? And it's permissionless. So at the end of the day, the free market is going to decide. And I'm actually encouraged by the idea that governments are going to be forced to, A, not to base their money or they'll lose more trust because people have other options now. And B, how about we offer actual incentives to, use and spend government money, right? Or like some kind of advantage, whether it's, ideas that I could think of off the top of my head are like the U.S. is now supporting all these stable coins, which is super interesting, but maybe some of these stable coins will start paying like the treasury yield, a percentage of that directly to the people holding the stable coin, right? There's all these interesting things that could be tried and could be done, and the future of money is going to be fascinating, and the history of money has fascinated me, right? But like, why not give perks and advantages? You hold X number. I mean, you could gamify some of these things. Like, hey, like you hold over $100,000 of fiat money, and guess what? You get free access to all the parks, all the national parks, all these different things, right? So there's these government NFTs could be minted off of that, right? You have a wallet, and you hold this, fiat currency in this country, fiat currency in that country, whatever it may be. Maybe it's a very small portion of your savings or whatever you want to use it for, and you get certain incentives for doing that, right? Like, I think instead of just extracting from the population and taking, there's going to be a focus on actually providing value. Like, hey, give me a reason to hold this instead of just extracting and stealing from me constantly via the insidious tax of inflation, right? So just some crazy ideas out there.
I do agree that we're going to have a whole new way that government interaction is going to be happening with us. I'm not going to even try and make any predictions about that. It could be anything that you said, or even something no one has even thought of till like 2 months from now, and then we finally get the seed of the idea that will bloom into whatever it turns into.
Yeah.
I like the social idea part, like the minting of the NFTs. Like if you got an NFT that
I knew you would like that. Yeah.
you know, essentially that's, I believe that's probably the next evolution of social media, where you have your digital wallet that shows an NFT that was minted at this location through whether a POAP, like a proof of attendance protocol, or but you start to collect like this book, this time-stamped history book.
People collect that as it is right now. They collect stamps, they collect old coins, they collect all these different things. I mean, the future of money is going to be on chain in a lot of ways. You know, like there's different ideas, right? Like you can, you have stable coins and you get some value, some sentimental value, some emotional value, some patriotic duty value, some intangible value, some, actual value, right? Like maybe some of these, like you said, POAP, which is a proof of attendance protocol or something, but an NFT that, was minted for something, and the government mints 100 of these NFTs a year. Like, we get these Purple Heart Awards and all these different things that could also be minted on chain. Whether you visit a national park or you do some kind of thing, gamify that a little bit, like reward the citizens, right? Yeah. Reward the people that are supporting your country and that you're, the citizenry of your country. And I think that is going to have to be the focus going forward, or people are not going to hold fiat currencies and they're not going to want to have that risk of just being debased, right? I'm
also just going to say, I'm not sold that Bitcoin is going to be the new global reserve. I think it will, but I'm always trying to be a skeptic in all things until we, if we're 20 years down the line and everyone's using Bitcoin, okay, yeah, then it's a reserve currency. But I just want to.
So are you a skeptic like Jason here from the All In Pod, Jason Calacanis? Bitcoin has been a wonderful game, but with a couple giant players cornering the market. The timing is right to build a better Bitcoin, restarting the game. Folks cornering the market will say this is foolish while they donate to Trump to encourage more buying. But all technology gets replaced over time, and Bitcoin will be no different. For intellectually honest Bitcoin maxis, what would a new protocol look like? How would you restart the game? Scroll down a little bit on this.
I mean, the technology is currency, and it's how it's getting implemented is
I guess you.
What's up for debate?
I guess Paul posted, "Hey Jason, touching on this right now," so we are going to talk about it. I think an important thing to note about Bitcoin, right, is that again, Bitcoin is the amalgamation of 50 to 100 years almost of cryptography research, computer science, all these ideas, libertarian philosophy, the Austrian School of Economics, all of this thought, ideas went together, game theory, all came together to create Bitcoin, right? So Bitcoin is this idea of absolute scarcity. And I think that lightning doesn't strike twice. You know what I mean? Like Bitcoin has now built the network effects of almost 2 decades. And it was going to continue to grow those network effects. Now we have nation states creating strategic Bitcoin reserves. There is no better new Bitcoin. I mean, like this idea was like, hey, we found this idea, we built this network. It's like, it just doesn't even make sense, right? Like the faith that's been built up into this network that has been ticking for, 15, 16, 17 years now, with no issues, just continuing to chug along. And if you, Paul, pull up bitfeed.live.
Hard to believe it's actually 15 years.
It's been crazy. It's crazy, right? It is the best performing asset in all of human history. Like it's 62% increase in fiat dollar terms per year. There is no better Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the amalgamation of studying the history of money and finding all these characteristics of money, right? And creating this base layer. And you can actually see the blockchain in real time here. It's one of my favorite sites to really visualize this network that's living and breathing and operating, right? So like you can see here, that was the last block that was formed of all the transactions, but just constantly you see all of these blocks, people sending transactions using this network all over the world, just dropping them in. At the bottom, you see the mempool of all of the transactions that are waiting for final settlement, which is done in this totally decentralized way all over the world, right? Like this energy that secures this network, like the mining entities, the security that's provided, you can't just, you don't just redo that, right? Like that, this is something that's built up over, decade plus. And we've got entire industries built around this. There's no just like making a new Bitcoin, right? Like Jason's problem is that he hasn't done the deep dive to fully understand the history of money and understand monetary principles and characteristics. And this was well thought out and well designed. This wasn't just like, oh, I just came up with this thing, magic internet money, it's done, right? Like, there was a genius behind this project and protocol that has been that was studying these different ideas, that was studying the history of money, that was studying computer science, that was studying legal structures and laws, game theory. All of these things were built into the system, and this is why we're at where we're at today, right? So, anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I think we're looking at a monetary system that is anti-fragile in the sense that it gets better as things creep up. They may limit it, and the visibility of Bitcoin overall is, I think, a massive pro in its favor. I think. Maybe to play a little bit of the other side, if I were to say, is Bitcoin the end game forever? I don't know. Because you do run into some interesting problems when you think about, okay, let's play out, we become an interplanetary species. How does information travel from planet to planet? Using bandwidth concerns, I don't know. I think that could there be something else that works better, faster in 500 years? Probably. I mean, we've seen new things come around that improve on existing systems. So I'm hesitant to say that, Bitcoin is it. That's but I think for where we are right now and for probably the next couple hundred years, I think it's a very strong system that we can continue to improve on. But I don't know. I could see his point playing this out to 500 years or
it's always great to think like that and to have, to offer a different perspective and point of view. I just think that what Bitcoin's base layer does was orchestrated and built so geniusly. When you really peel back the onion and think about all these different things, just the issuance of supply, the fact that it's fair to all people, they know the inflation rate until, all the Bitcoin's issued. And then this idea that we're going to keep the block space on the base layer scarce to incentivize security, right? As demand grows, the transaction fees for using that base layer will also go up to incentivize the security on the network.
It's a perfect free market.
So even after all of the coins are mined, right, you still have this security-based model based on actual usage of the network. So if the network is valuable, it will be used, and there will be incentive for security on that network. All of these little things were really thought out by Satoshi, but Bitcoin at this base layer is really this beautiful savings technology for all of humanity that governments can't coerce and stop, right? It's a brilliant design, and then it takes the world and finds incentivizes all of this green energy that's being developed all over the world so people can monetize that energy and create Bitcoin with it, right? And all of this stuff, right? It's like this arms race that no one jurisdiction can pin it down because it's this free market principle that says, hey, the value of this network is going up. Guess what? We need more security. The incentive to the market is, hey, we build more miners because it's profitable, right? So just such a brilliantly designed system. What you described about another planet or all these other ideas, we can have secondary, second, third, fourth layers of Bitcoin where you can, Lightning Network is a perfect example. I can port some of my Bitcoin from the base layer. I can take, say $5,000. I port it over to Lightning, which is a layer 2. And then all of the transactions I do out there, right, I don't get the same decentralization that I have on my base layer with my savings, but I can do 100 transactions out here for next to no cost. And then when I'm done, when I'm ready, I can port whatever I want back to the Lightning layer to the base layer, or I can, leave it on Lightning to do more transactions that, will have instant settlement, super fast. It's kind of like today if you use PayPal or you use Venmo, you're not interacting with that base layer of money. You're 3, 4, 5 levels up, and you're sending it around.
One thing to also consider is, maybe Bitcoin as it is right now wouldn't be able to be an interplanetary currency, but that's one of the beauties of these blockchains is we can evolve it to suit the needs as we continue to go through the years. We can do adaptations to it, and only if everyone agrees to it and says and can't find any flaws with it, then it actually gets implemented. Mm-hmm. So, maybe it can't handle, like I said, can't handle it right now, but in 20 years we say, oh, we have to figure this out. Everyone in the world together will come together and say, oh, we got to figure out a solution, and we might be able to find something.
IPFS, are you familiar with IPFS?
Interplanetary file system.
Yeah. So, that's one solution that you can use as far as getting information across from one planet to another. It essentially stores data on devices, and once you connect to that device, you have the history of that device's transactions, so it could always...
Yeah.
Interplanetary, we could use light beams to submit you could send that information via light, to send that, and that would happen in a second, right? Like, hey, a miner that's going on Mars solves the block, and it might take a fraction of a second, but you beam that.
It'll take it. The sunlight The time it takes from the light from the sun to get to the Earth is like 7 or 8 minutes.
What about from the Earth to Mars? Paul, look that up. How long does light take to get from Earth to Mars? That's what I want to know. I bet it's only a couple seconds.
I don't think it's a couple
Oh,
seconds.
let's find out.
If you take a look at who's using that technology, it's really interesting too.
Let's see here. What is it?
Go to the website.
It says that's about 3 minutes and 11 seconds.
Where did you get that?
Right there, point number 1, third point.
Real world context.
That's 10 minutes. No, what is that? 14?
At the closest, it's 3 minutes. At the furthest, it's 22 on
And
average.
that's light. So light takes roughly. Okay, wow, yeah, that's a little far. Yeah, so we need to block every 10 minutes. So
Yeah.
there would have to be a.
You could find solutions.
Yeah,
for something
it's just
like
interesting.
This.
It's fascinating.
But
to think about.
but like we don't know what problems are going to happen 500 years from now.
Exactly.
And so like
Right, that's what I'm saying. That's what's
I
nice
don't
about
think
the
that's
quote.
Jason's point. So I'm giving him maybe a little bit more credit.
That's not his point. We're going down a different rabbit hole.
But
he just thinks like this whole network and it's just this is just magic internet money. It's just going to be replaced, right? Like the Bitcoin's value proposition. I just think it needs more study. There's a lot more, and it's not his fault. I mean, most people, again, like a lot of people haven't spent the time to really go down Bitcoin's rabbit hole and really study the technology and understand the genesis. Go back and read all of Satoshi's posts from like 2011, or go read that forum. Read the Bitcoin white paper. Learn about this. Learn about the again. We have one of our other pods is the Cypherpunk pod. Learn about the cypherpunks. Learn about Friedrich Hayek. Learn about the extropians. Learn about all of the different communities, the computer scientists that were thinking about this idea of decentralized money and money on the internet that without a trusted issuer, without a central third party. I mean, the Byzantine generals problem. There's so many different rabbit holes one can go down. And, each one takes hours, right? I mean, each one takes a long time. I did a series this year with Aaron Van Weerdum, who's the chief editor of the Bitcoin magazine, right? And we spent 10 to 20 hours of episodes. Like it was a great series, right? Like studying the genesis of Bitcoin and why Bitcoin was important. And, each chapter of his book is an hour or two. And we went through it all, right? We talked about, scientists that were doing research, 50, 60 years ago, right? And like cryptography research and all these different things and ideas that led up to the creation of Bitcoin, right? So this has been incredibly well thought out and incredibly designed, right? Which on the surface, you might not think, right? You might not think by just hearing, oh, it's just this coin that was created. But as you peel back those layers and really dive down those rabbit holes, I promise you'll be fascinated. And at the end, you will come to the conclusion that there is no better Bitcoin for the use case of Bitcoin.
It is a perfect story. And then the idea of Satoshi not being known it adds a very sort of romantic touch to the whole origin story of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, that ethos, that story, that, and again, Satoshi was incredibly selfless. I mean, what he did and what he gave to humanity was like not so he could just like get rich, right? If you look at the coins, like he has like none of those coins have ever like really even moved. Like those wallets attributed to him, like there's no evidence that he ever moved any of those coins. So, he gave a gift to humanity. And if you study, what he did and you look at his posts and you look at everything he said and you like this was his contribution and he did it in a selfless, anonymous way. I mean, that's, incredibly selfless. Like in my mind, in 100 years, he will be studied like an Einstein or like a Socrates or an Aristotle or, somebody who is, one of the, like a person in history that changes the course of history, right? Like that's who Satoshi is.
It's just amazing to me that we might never know who he was. Mm-hmm. Like we know who Jack the Ripper is now, and that happened. What was that, like 1400s or something like that? We were still able to figure that out, and in our modern technology, with everything getting recorded, we might not be able to figure out who actually Satoshi was.
I mean, Satoshi was one of the few people that existed that could conceal who he was. I mean, and that in and of itself is damning in a lot of ways, right? Because
it narrows it down.
We can go down this rabbit hole, and we probably will at a future point.
We have no way of proving.
He covered his tracks so good that the best evidence at the end of the day is extremely circumstantial.
Exactly,
I guess is the way I'll put it. Right.
Yeah.
I think that deserves its own episode.
It's more than an episode. Yeah. It's a long rabbit hole to go down. So, Paul, what are you pulling up here?
Well, I just wanted to say on that topic, previous to Bitcoin, there was a few other digital currencies.
So if you watch our Cypherpunk series with Aaron Van Weerdum, we go down all these different things, and there's eCash and BitGold and
Right.
DigiCash and there's
so-
all these different ideas, right? Hashcash and there's so many different attempts at creating what the end game goal was, but a lot of these people who are creating, they lacked an expertise in a certain area where they didn't understand the history of money, or they didn't fully understand why decentralization is important. And there's all these different attempts to create something like Bitcoin, but again, absolute scarcity, the idea, the discovery of this idea of absolute scarcity, that doesn't strike twice. Bitcoin has this insane foundation of this genesis, this origin story, all of these factors, the network effects, the security built around the model. We're talking about an insane amount of energy that protects and pushes this thing forward. And that is growing, on grid, off grid. It's funding and financing green energy projects all over the world. It's bringing energy to places on the rivers in fucking Africa in the middle of nowhere, right? Where hey, why would you build a energy facility for a village in Africa in the middle of nowhere? Well, guess what? Now there's an incentive to do that. Now I can go build that hydro plant, and I can rent out the power. I can sell the power to a Bitcoin person. I can sell 90% of that power to a Bitcoin miner, and then the other 10% can go to provide electricity for the civilians who might not even be able to afford it or pay for it or have any way to monetize that. Right? They're literally living in a village in the middle of nowhere.
I mean, it'll allow the globe to decentralize in terms of its location. The industrial movement pushed everyone to big cities because that's where the money was, that's where work was, that's where electricity was. Now with the ability for someone to take idle land, populate it with electricity, people can follow.
Yeah. Have you read The Sovereign Individual?
I haven't finished it.
Oh man, it's one of my favorite book of all time. It's got to be. It's so good. And when you read the book, you got to realize these guys wrote this book in the fucking 90s. And they predicted the creation of Bitcoin. They predicted all. I mean, it's just so fascinating. Such a great book. Well worth the read.
Oh, it's amazing what really intelligent people can predict will happen. I mean, a lot of it's just utter insanity. But I think Tesla was predicting Wi-Fi. It was back in the 1930s or something.
Really? Yeah.
I think that was one of his predictions.
Oh wow, interesting. Yeah.
I mean, both Tesla and Henry Ford predicted that there would be some sort of an energy battle. I forget what the quote was, but there's a fantastic Henry Ford quote about the future of how we use energy.
He said there will be energy money or something. I think that's what you're thinking of.
It was something along those lines. But
he goes, energy money is the future.
Yeah.
Kind of thinking about that. I'd put money on the sun and solar energy. What a source of power. I hope we don't have to wait until oil and coal run out before we tackle that. But no, okay, there's no single universally quote. I thought there was a quote that he made, talking about the energy dollar or something like that, that the future of money was based on energy, but maybe not. Maybe it was somebody else. If the people of the nation understood our banking and monetary system, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning. The one aim of these financiers is world control by the creation of inextinguishable debts. We are going to take the control of money away from the bankers and put it in the hands of the people where it belongs. With an energy currency, we can do this. Wow. So yeah, that's a very prescient, interesting quote, right? So there's so much under the hood of Bitcoin that just escapes most people that really haven't gone down that rabbit hole. And it's a long rabbit hole to go down because even myself, I learn new things about Bitcoin. I heard about Bitcoin in 2014, 2015 and got involved and was fascinated by it. But I'm still learning new things today. I think I can't remember who I had on the podcast the other day. We were just talking about the idea of where Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash had the dispute, and eventually they forked off. I think it was called the block size wars. Yeah, we were talking about that.
Carl Dong.
Carl Dong from Obscura VPN. Yeah, me and Carl were talking about this, and he basically said that part of why we shouldn't raise the block size is to ensure that that the currency still has the security, it still has a budget later on, right? Because if we increase the block size on the base layer later on after all the Bitcoin's been mined, we need to still incentivize the miners to provide security for that network. So that there has to be transaction fees on that base level, and everything else can be kind of stacked and built on top of that. So there's just so many fascinating different rabbit holes you can go down when it comes to all this. Paul, you had what was the take you had up there? I think it was a Scott Bessent clip on him when he was on CNBC. Yeah, play this clip. Let's go back to the beginning. And Stephen Lepka, if you guys haven't followed Steven, he's got some great insights. He's great follow.
Supposedly there's disappointment that we're not going to be buying Bitcoin outright using taxpayer dollars. But if we can do it in a revenue neutral way, we would. Number one, were you a proponent for the reserve? And two, is there a way to buy Bitcoin, not just acquire it through, I don't know, however we've gotten these $17 billion worth at this point?
Yeah, so Joe, I am a big proponent of the U.S. taking the worldwide lead in crypto. I think we have to bring it onshore and they use our best practices and regulation. I think that the Bitcoin reserve, before you can accumulate it, you have to stop selling it. So what we have now is from a seized asset pool, and I wasn't there when it happened, but I believe what happened was about 500 million of Bitcoin was seized, half of it was sold, and what we have now that, say it's over 10 billion, 10, 12 billion, that's all through appreciation. So the first thing to do is to stop the selling. So we are going to, after the victims are paid and all of that, any seized assets will go into this reserve, and then we'll see what the way forward is for more acquisitions for the reserves. And we're starting with Bitcoin, but it's an overall crypto reserve.
Right. So how do you think about buying, though? And how should taxpayers think about that? Because effectively we'll be levering ourselves to some degree, given that we don't have a surplus of money right now to make these investments.
Yeah, so that's why the first step is to stop selling, and then we're going to put a plan in place from there. So we're having this crypto summit. I'm going back to Washington this afternoon, and then we'll talk about the way forward.
I think that that is an incredibly bullish. 2 minutes from the United States Treasury Secretary. I mean, before you wouldn't even imagine, the fundamentals that are appearing right now, whatever happens with the price happens with the price. That's short term shit. If you're playing long term games, the fundamentals are so insane right now. You can't even. This is game theory playing out on a nation state scale that I wouldn't have anticipated for personally another 5 to 10 years, even being a discussion. So some pretty big fundamental things are happening right now, and the highest levels of leadership in government of the world are seriously and strategically engaging and thinking about Bitcoin as this asset, right? So there will be more Bitcoin acquired by the U.S. government. I don't know how it's all going to happen, but it is going to happen. Other nation states are going to acquire this absolutely scarce asset. And this is not going away. There's no better Bitcoin. This thing is not going back in the bottle, right? I guess that's my point thinking about this. What do you guys think?
I don't know. It feels like the interviewer or the host was trying to get him to make more promises, and this is a big problem. So it's one of those things where you just gotta. How do you eat a whale? One bite at a time. Yeah. It's just, all right, before I try and predict what we're going to do to acquire more, let's just, let's stop selling what we have, see where we're sitting, and then we'll figure out the next step. So,
it was funny when the price hit 70,000. I was remembering the last time that it hit 70,000, or when the all-time high was 70,000, and I was like, the dynamics have changed dramatically from that point in time. And so it is funny to think about the price, and it's definitely not good to obsess over it and stare at the charts, but it is funny when those moments happen and you're like, how is it trading at the same price? And yet now we have a bunch of players that are actively pushing for a strategic reserve to get creative with how we can store more Bitcoin. I don't know, the 2025 is a very, very different ball game, and the domino pieces I think are laid out in a really interesting way. Yeah, we'll see how quickly it takes for all of them to start falling, but I don't know. I'm pretty excited to see how all this plays out.
There's a famous quote that says something like, "Markets can remain irrational much longer than you can remain solvent." That's a classic quote. And then if you're playing short term games, you're going to win short term prizes, but the real key is long term thinking. And I think that just aligns with if you're a Bitcoiner, that aligns with your ethos. If you really are a Bitcoiner, you understand time preference, and you understand fundamentals, and if you look at what's happening, who's selling, who's buying, it's the long-term people who understand and hold, they're accumulating more, and the people that are getting shaken out and like selling immediately, or like people that have been held the coins for like a month, 2 months, right? It's like you're trying to play short-term games with like probably one of the most fundamental, economic technologies that have ever existed. The best money that's ever been engineered, that's ever existed.
It's true savings technology.
It's kind of wild, yeah. Kind of wild.
It's also a lot to wrap your head around. So it might even be decades before it all gets ironed out, because there's just so much that you can do with it when it comes to the programmability of it, to how other, once other things implement it, how they'll affect them. It'll take some time before we.
Yeah. What else you got for us, Paul?
Just some price action stuff. Do you want to touch on that?
No, I don't really want to touch on short-term price action. Goes up, goes down. You might as well consult a crystal ball. I mean, Steven's just saying that, either a sailor is buying or someone big is. I mean, again, when stuff's on sale, when there's blood in the streets, be greedy. When there's, I don't know exactly what the quote is.
I think the quote is, when people are greedy, be afraid. When people are afraid, be greedy.
There you go. Something like that. Yeah. So.
Is that all we got for the week?
No. We've got this last little topic about the income tax. Maybe let's touch on that before we close out. So here's Vivek Ramaswamy talking about, we didn't have a federal income tax before 1913, and it's only after the U.S. adopted it that we saw the explosion of the federal bureaucracy and entitlement state. That's not a coincidence. It's a cause and effect relationship. We'll do our part in Ohio by eliminating the state income tax over time here at home. I love that. So I guess there's this big question. And, the past 2 weeks, we had, maybe it was 3 weeks ago, Dominic Frisby was here, and we did our series on his, our cypherpunk series on his book, Daylight Robbery, which, I mean, such a fantastic book. I learned so much, even just, unpacking and talking to him about all those ideas. But, he studied the history of taxation all the way from the most ancient of civilizations, like the ancient Sumerians. And like a lot of the lessons they learned are like some of the same lessons we're learning today. So I don't want to get like too far off into the weeds on the tax issue, but I think that, the U.S. for the first 200 or 300 years of its existence, like didn't have, it
was all tariffs.
Income tax. It was all tariff based. It was all these different things. And, tariffs can be good. They can be bad in the sense of like they are a tax, right? But, some level of it may be necessary. And today we just released the episode on our Cypherpunk, my series with Dominic. Paul finally produced it and put it out, but it talks about why the Civil War happened and what led up to the Civil War. And like we study and we think and we study that like, it was all about slavery, but really it had nothing, like it was a part of it. It was a component, but like really the real causes were all about the tariffs. It was all about the taxes between those two, between the North and the South. And what's fascinating is that I think it was the War of 1812. And what we found out was that I think it was the U.S. and Canada were at war, and Britain was backing. Obviously, Canada was a colony or whatever, and so. But we got most of our goods before that from Great Britain. But of course, when we go to war, they're going to cut off all of our goods, all of our stuff. So after the war, ended, what the South basically said was, "Hey, like we need to put tariff." Like they were basically saying, like tariff us. Like we need some tariffs to make sure that the North can have. We can have some protectionism there to make sure we have some domestic economy and we just don't import everything from overseas, right? And this is kind of the same argument that's playing out today, right? Like where if we get everything from China, what happens if we go to war with China? What happens if they invade us? The same thing with all these different nations, right? We got to have some domestic production, even if it even if it might not make the most economic sense at the time. We got to have, because again, what's the goal of the government? Like, what are the few roles of the government? Is like national security, protecting the citizens of the country. Like that's their one goal. So like some level of tariffs to make sure we have critical industries being produced and built here, like makes national security sense, right?
You don't even have to have like the China go to war. We go to war with China. They could have societal collapse on their side of things.
Yeah.
Who knows? And
you just don't know.
Then all of a sudden, now you're screwed, and it's not even like trying to fight them or anything.
No, that's a fantastic point. Fantastic point, Kyle. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there, right? But like this same story played out, right? Where like the South basically said like, hey, listen, like we know we're going to pay the tax, we're going to suffer. And they've said like, pass this 20% tariff because they realize the importance. Like, hey, we have to make sure you guys have an economy out there and you're protected and reshore some industry there, right? And they accepted that and accepted the tariffs so that they would be more encouraged to buy from the North. So there was some domestic economy. What happened was, though, the North, which always happens with taxes, is wanted more and more and more and more. And we went from 20% creeping up to 40, 50%. And that was, not good. They weren't having it anymore, right? So if you look at all of the years that kind of led up to the Civil War, you see that it was this fight and pull between the South and the North over this idea of tariffs, right? Like it was like, hey, Civil War was about to happen, and they pulled back and said, okay, we're going to reduce the tariffs over time. And then they would get to that point where they were going to reduce it back down to what it was, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, well, we're going to raise it again, and then all the tensions raised. And eventually, it's, if you look back, like one of the most famous quotes Lincoln has was, like, hey, evacuate Fort Sumter. Let you have the people are kind of on your side on this issue. Like if you just pull back, we can rectify things. And his famous quote was, well, what about the revenue, right? Because that was a tariff collection spot where they were able to collect those duties and tariffs. And, the story of the Civil War, as are most events that happen through history, kind of get whitewashed and changed around to fit the whatever political narrative. But if you really dive down and look at a lot of these things, they always have to do with some form of tax. There's always taxes behind them, right?
American Revolution, Boston Tea Party was a result of basically.
There you go, exactly. So all these different things, it was this idea of no taxation without representation, exactly. Right? My conclusion at the end of this book that I came to, and you can quote me on this, is that no representation without taxation. That's what I think. Like if you're not paying taxes and contributing to the society, you shouldn't be deciding how those taxes are spent. Like case closed, period. Like there's this quote that came up as like, if you rob Peter to pay Paul, you're always going to have the vote of Paul. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, so like I think this was also a model of like ancient Greece and stuff. Like if you had to be a contributing member of society to be able to set the policy and decide it. To me, this just makes intuitive sense. I know for so many people, it's like the lowest common denominator, right? Like we've got these people who are elected, who we even looked at that guy earlier. He said, too many people on the island are going to capsize the island. I mean, like this is what we're dealing with. Like that you're an elected official. You shouldn't even be allowed to vote. I mean, that is like how much of an idiot can you possibly be? Like there should be some level of civics test and contributing.
We need to
this
have
is my
a
opinion.
filter
Right? This is probably not a popular opinion. Popular opinion is like everybody should vote. Like no, like if you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, why would you vote on an issue? Like you have no idea what you're talking about. You're severely uneducated. Like that's just my take, right?
So we need to have some sort of filtration mechanism to weed out some people that shouldn't vote. Because if no one's paying attention and they're allowed to vote, it becomes a popularity contest. It's not about the actual nuance of policies and the vision of they have.
Probably not a popular take, but my take is no representation without taxation. That's
it's a start. It's somewhere to start at least.
Yeah. So if you're a net taker from society, right? Like net on net, if you're a taker from society, you should not be voting. You should not be allowed. That's just you just shouldn't be allowed to vote. I'm sorry.
I can throw on another stipulation.
What's your stipulation?
If you work for the federal government, you don't get to vote.
Oh, that's an interesting one.
Or it's like the federal election.
That's an interesting one. I don't know. I'd have to think about it. If your federal government income is taxed and you're I don't know. It's an interesting thought, but
I think that's such a small population. Like that's
you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised.
It's over a million people.
It has grown into millions and millions of people.
Yeah, but I think if you're receiving government funding, you should just.
I'm not. I wasn't saying instead of you have to be a net taxpayer. I'm saying in addition to.
Yeah, no, I think,
I got you.
I think it's simple, no representation without taxation. If you're a net drain on the productive society, if you're taking more than you're giving, you should not be able to decide how funds are allocated. I just think it's a conflict of interest. Just like we shouldn't have people in Congress, regulating and trading at the same time. It's the same concept, but just in reverse, right? Like you want to be able to vote? Okay, great. Earn it. Like go contribute to society and then you can vote, right? Like I just think it's an unpopular opinion, but it might be.
We'd love for you to vote because that means you're contributing to society.
There you go. Exactly. Right. It just is this lowest common denominator, right? It's just kind of silly.
They should pass like a civics test, to be able to vote or something. Or at least be able to send 5 emails a week.
Oh, I think Tim Pool said this as a solution when it comes to voting. It says, anyone can vote, but your ballot's completely blank. You have to write the names in yourself in the position that they're running for. So it's like you actually have to research and know what's going on.
That's interesting. I like that one.
No cheat sheets. You have to do it from memory.
That's too funny.
That take also like have an ID, or wasn't there something about needing?
I mean, that goes without saying, but Paul, did you see that? Did you pull up something about ID for voting? I mean, the fact that there is no there are people voting with no IDs. It's just unbelievable. I mean, like, how can people possibly be behind something like that? It's just so absurd. I mean, you have ideas to do literally everything in reality, whether it's, go to a bar, go to a gas station to buy whatever you want,
You need an
go
ID to see a rated R movie.
Go
That's
to-
only 17.
Yeah, you got to have it. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like just absurd, right? Like, you want to get on a plane. I mean, just like, so, JD Vance here, he proposed an amendment to declare Election Day a national holiday, which I think would put to bed any excuse to not vote. Like, if you don't want to vote, you still get a day off of work or a day off of whatever, and you can go hang out. You don't want to vote, don't vote. But like, there's no excuse not to vote if we do that, right? And then, requiring registered U.S. citizens to vote in person using paper ballots. I think that's key. Nobody trusts these machines. They've been proven to be connected to Wi-Fi. It's just absurd. There's lack security, no security. You get in some of these swing state cities that are holding out for a month after the federal election, and it's 99% of one political party. And like Detroit was like there was 2,000 poll workers, and only like 8 of them were like Republicans. Like, that just should never happen. That's just impossible. This is the type of bullshit that's going on, which is just total ripe for fraud, corruption, and it's indeed what we've been seeing.
Funny.
So,
funny enough, it's a bit of a tangent, but did you guys ever watch the show Eureka?
No.
Back on Sci-Fi, like 2010 or so. It's a town of a bunch of super geniuses, and they just said, invent whichever you can invent. And they have elections, and in there, it says, no, we can't have any machines in the elections because someone here will crack it.
Of course,
and ruin it. That's why it had to be on paper.
I mean, these same election machines are being used in Venezuela and all over the. I mean, this is it's just total bullshit, total corruption.
I just find it funny
people aren't buying it anymore. We're not the illusion that the mainstream media puts out to keep everybody like the government is funding the media. I mean, the whole thing is just so unbelievable. I mean, this is like some third world bullshit. Thank God Doge is coming in and eliminating this nonsense. But yeah, I mean, paper ballots, keep it real simple. Paper ballots. I mean, you've got entire countries like Argentina did their whole election in one day. They elected Milei. They did it all on paper ballots and counted the whole thing. It took the same.
We do it in Florida.
It took 3. Yeah, I mean, Florida is fantastic. We fixed the bullshit, right? Like there was the Bush Gore hanging chat, all that bullshit. Yeah. DeSantis came in and got that corrupt clown person that was in Palm Beach County and was trying to do the same bullshit in the swing states in a big Democrat city there. He got rid of her ass for not doing her job, and now our elections run like clockwork, and it's just done the same night. You get all the results. That's how it needs to be. People need to demand that as a standard. Anything else is completely unacceptable in 2024. And if you want people to stop complaining about fraud, abuse, all this bullshit, get that shit right one day. Entire countries, France, they can do it in one fucking day on paper ballots. There's no fucking excuse. Totally unacceptable. But yeah, this is a great idea.
I don't think anyone in Europe uses any machines.
I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, it's just paper. Keep it paper locally in precinct. Have physical eyes counting it. Super transparent, super easy, no problems. Right? That's how it should be. We need to demand that here.
Think of how many more poll workers you could have if we had a holiday.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, of course. It's easy.
People could go out, they could vote, they could spend a couple hours, monitoring stuff.
The problem is the Democrats will never win another election if this goes through, so they're going to fight this tooth and nail. Yeah. It's why they're fighting voter identification, fighting all these things. I mean, it just shows you how deep the rot and corruption is, and it's sad to say because there are, again, a lot of former Democrats which are now part of, Trump's administration, right? Like the Tulsi Gabbards of the world, she was the chair of the DNC, the Elon Musks of the world, right? The RFK Jr., fucking Kennedy. It was. I mean, like, look what you've done. I mean, you've alienated, like, it's just crazy. It's just absurd. But yeah. Anybody else have any closing thoughts on that?
Well, I think one last.
What do you got for us?
Thought is, I think we should pay homage to Steak and Shake for.
Let's pay homage to Steak and Shake. Are they accepting Bitcoin now?
No.
I hear that's being entertained.
Let's hear this.
Tell them, Kyle.
They have switched out what they use in the fryers. They now are back to the good old beef tallow.
I think they're accepting Bitcoin and they're using beef tallow. What a great American-based company. Got to give them credit.
Has anyone had their fries yet?
Not yet. I've been meaning to. There's one on.
Yeah, there you go. Steak and Shake. Should Steak and Shake accept Bitcoin? Go down. Steak and Shake has always been the GOAT, right? Go up, go up, go up, go up. Right there. Should Steak and Shake accept Bitcoin? This is real.
Wow.
Fantastic. Steak and Shake has always been my GOAT. Yes, please. So that's
I'm taking the long way home.
Times are changing. Times are changing. Well, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure today. Thank you all for joining. And we'll be back at it next Wednesday. So hopefully to have you guys back on.
Yeah, real quick, guys. Just want to let you know about Mining Disrupt that's coming.
Oh,
up
yeah. Mining Disrupt, fantastic
very soon,
conference in Miami.
An incredible opportunity to meet people in real life. It is an intensive 3-day event in which you'll learn everything about mining. BitX will be there. Team Matty Ice will be there. So we're gonna go ahead and play a quick. Yeah, go ahead.
They're not paying me anything. They're just giving my team free tickets. I'm not even gonna be there this year. I'm sad that I'm missing it. But I had a trip planned with my family because of spring break and all this stuff. So I will be in the great state of Wyoming in Jackson Hole. So sad to miss Mining Disrupt. It's one of my favorite conferences, man. It's one of the coolest places. If you just want to learn about mining, learn about the industry, go there and just walk around. There's so much technology being developed, whether it be immersion technology or electrical technology or new miners and it's just a fascinating place to be. They usually have a beautiful big expo hall. There's all these different booth stations, different companies, different startups. It's well worth whatever the entry price is. But if you use our code, you get a discount.
I'll play it and
play the
we'll
clip,
send it.
Play it and we'll send it.
Take care, guys. See you next week.
See you next week.
You definitely got to come to Mining Disrupt. The largest mining-focused conference. It's pretty dang awesome.
It's a great opportunity for the people.
Let's go out and make some money with it.
Get engaged. Defend the industry.
The Runway.